Hello, this is the finale part of Not Home Anymore by Daisynone. Link in the description. All author's notes have been removed between chapters. Also, any NSFW scene will be removed. This part will cover chapter 21 to 26. There will be some spelling mistakes in this part. I have tried to fix them, but there are too many. Let's get started. Chapter 21, Towards the Sand, Pant. Pant. The blonde was keeping his head down and panting, trying to catch his breath. No one likes running for hours, and his body clearly said that. The blonde raised his head and looked in front of him. Refugee Point was just a few meters away. He just needed to cross the hill up front, and he will be there. The blonde looked behind and saw a dark cloud. Like any other ninja, he considered it a bad omen. The blonde's mind was racing with thoughts. He needed to do something. The scourge might still be on his trail. If he stays put, they might catch up. He needed to go somewhere safe. He needed to leave this continent with the two girls. Then again, he knew that the guys from the Shimmering Winds won't let him leave alone. Without them, in other words. He didn't mind. He could use the help, and he could use more companions. Besides, he still had a lot of tricks to learn. Shaking his head, the blonde started walking slowly and painfully up the hill. As he reached the top, he took a deep breath and looked in front of him. He could clearly see Refugee Point. The guards were patrolling, the fire was burning, and he could see the horses of the organization's members. The blonde smiled and sighed in relief. If they were here, that meant that Saya and Finia were safe. Wiping the sweat of his forehead, the blonde started running towards the camp. As he was running, the guards on station turned their attention towards him and tensed. As the blonde got closer, they relaxed, recognizing him. Two of the guards approached the blonde as he stopped in front of them. The guards saluted the blonde with respect, making him look at them strangely. "Welcome back, Byako, sir," one of the guards said, keeping a straight face, but Naruto could see the respect in his eyes. It's good to be back?" Naruto asked, taken by surprise by the salute and the respectful tone. "We were waiting for your arrival, sir. Captain Niles is also waiting for you," the second guard said towards the blonde. "Right, care to tell me why you are so respectful?" he asked, blinking in curiosity. The guards looked at each other and then at the blonde with a smile on their face. "Quite simple, sir. We have heard of your brave deeds in protecting the princess, and everyone here at Refugee Point came to respect you more than before," he said. Naruto blinked in surprise. "Okay," he said, still shocked. "Is Finia here?" he asked. The second guard nodded. "Yes, she is debating the next move in the tent over there," he said, turning around and pointing towards a large tent that had the organization's horses near it. Naruto nodded. "Thanks," he said as he started walking away. The guards returned to their posts. As Naruto reached the tent, he heard people talking inside. He could clearly hear Finia arguing with the organization's mage from what it seemed. Curious as to what was happening, the blonde waited outside and started listening to the conversation. "My princess, you must understand, we cannot wait here for him," the mage said. "I don't care, we will wait and that's final," Finia countered angrily. "But you heard Captain Niles. There was a Scarlet Patrol here 2 days ago. They might be retuning from South Shore any time," the mage argued. "Are you expecting me to leave Naruto behind?" the girl asked furiously. "No, your highness. We can leave a message telling him where to look for us and we will depart," Sillin replied to the girl's question. "And what about the Death Knights?" Finia asked, slamming her hands on the table. "If they catch Naruto, then... Naruto heard her starting to whimper and sob. "Your highness, I know you love the boy, but it's not like you are going to marry him," the mage pressed on. "It is," she shouted back, startling the mage and the rest of the people in the room. "I didn't tell him, but I would be more than happy to marry him, and for him to become the king of Stormwind," she shouted. Naruto lowered his head after hearing that and wiped a tear of happiness from his eyes. "And not just me," she then said, making Naruto raise his head. "Saya will also marry him." "What?" shouted the entire room, and Naruto outside started choking on the air he was breathing. "That's impossible," someone in the room said. "It cannot be done," another added. "It can? Or have you forgotten about the history? There was one king that had 2 wives," she argued. "That was because of necessity." The mage replied calmly. "He had to marry both to unite 2 factions that had been at war and unite the humans under one banner. So what?" Finia asked stubbornly. "Can't we do this to strengthen our allegiance with Darnassus?" she asked. "She is not of royal blood," the mage said, pointing towards a figure next to Finia. Naruto took a deep breath and walked inside, making everyone look at him. The blonde glared at the mage, who looked at him with a raised eyebrow. "Since when do you care if she is of royal blood or not?" asked Naruto. Just as the mage was about to reply, Naruto continued, "I'm not of royal blood, but if Phinia wants to marry me, I will gladly accept it. Would you go against her wishes?" he asked, stopping next to Phinia. "Naruto," she said, looking at him. The blonde looked at her and then at Seiya and gave them an eye smile. The girls teared up as they looked at him. "Did you think I was going to die?" he asked calmly. "You don't have to worry about me. It takes more than a couple of death knights to take down Uzumaki Naruto," he said with a chuckle as he cupped the girl's cheeks in his hands. "Don't cry, all right?" he asked. "Well, it's nice to see you in one piece, brat," Tirasves said with a grin. "Seems like I was wrong about you. You can hold it in tough situations." Naruto closed his eyes and sighed. He that opened his eyes and turned towards the table and placed his hands on it. "All right, listen, we have problems," he said, gaining everyone's attention. "What problems?" the mage asked. "While I was trying to trick the knights into trapping them in a cave, I found out that they constantly watched my every move with a shade," he said, making everyone tense. "Where are you going with this?" asked Niles, shaking slightly. "Are they heading here?" she asked. "Oh, possibly," the blonde acknowledged. "I managed to trap 3 of the 5 knights in a cave. That won't hold them," a gnome from the organization said. "Akullion is right," admitted Tirasvis. "It will take more than that to stop a death knight." "It doesn't matter. It bought us precious time." The blonde said, "I lost track of the shade in Hillsbrad foothills, but I don't know for how long," he admitted. "They might be heading here as we speak," he said. "What should we do?" asked Sillin. "We need to leave the continent," the blonde replied, shocking everyone. "I've been measuring the options. We cannot go to Outland, that's for sure," he said as everyone in the organization nodded. "We cannot return to Deadwind Pass because of the Scarlet," this time Phinia nodded. "But why towards Kalimdor? Why not Ironfire?" asked Seiya, curious. "If we go to Ironforge, we will encounter 2 problems. The first will be that the undead will most likely follow us there and attack the city, and that there might be Stormwind patrols there," replied Naruto to the girl. "So where do you plan on going in Kalimdor?" "Darnassus would be a good idea, but we cannot just go there and tell them that we are hiding the princess from Stormwind and her father," the organization's mage replied to the blonde. "Do you guys by any chance have a hiding place in Kalimdor?" Naruto asked. "It would be the best solution to hide there for a while," he admitted. Sillin scratched his chin and took a map from his pocket and placed it on the table. He opened it and looked over it, tracing the areas with a finger. He then stopped over a region named Tanaris and tapped on it. "We have a hiding place there, in Tanaris," he said, and then moved his finger over the map again and stopped over our outpost. "We also are in good terms with the outpost in Feralas, and we can hide there as well," he said, looking at the blonde. "The best option would be Tanaris. Who knows what spies can be in the outpost," replied Naruto. "What about the Horde?" Tirasves asked, making everyone look at her. "What about it?" Kullian asked. "From what Zagark told us, a bunch of orcs wanted to take the princess to thrall for her father's mistakes," she replied. Naruto looked at the girl in question and saw her with her head down. The blonde smiled and moved his arm around her shoulder and brought her close to him. She looked up at the blonde and smiled, moving her head on his chest and closing her eyes. "Don't worry, I will protect her, even if it kills me," the blonde said, looking at Seiya. "I will protect both of them." He then looked at everyone. "Even if I have to go alone, I will go to Tanaris," he said sternly. The organization members looked at each other and then towards the blonde. "If you go, we will go." The mage said, "We have been given the task to protect the princess at all costs," he said. "Good, we need to take a boat tonight and go there." Naruto said. "Why tonight?" asked Phinia. "From what I heard, there was a Scarlet Patrol a few days here," Naruto said. "Wait, you were spying on us?" asked Phinia, backing away slightly. "I was curious why people were yelling," the blonde replied with a grin. The girl looked at him and then glared. "You know, you will have a lot to make up for," she said, and Naruto blinked at her. "For what?" he asked, not understanding. "For playing hero," Seiya replied to his question, looking angrily at him. "What?" the blonde shouted, shocked. "I had to do something or else they would have caught us. And I can't risk losing you two." "Then you would risk your own life?" asked Phinia, tearing up again. "You would play the bait and die." Naruto tried to reply, but Seiya cut him off. If you died, do you think we would have been happy? She asked, also tearing up. Naruto looked between the two girls, not knowing how to reply or what to do. They were about to cry for something he had done because they were worried for him. Naruto lowered his head and then looked up again at the two girls. He moved towards them and grabbed them, pulling them in a hug. I know I said this before, but you aren't going to lose me. Not now, not ever, he said, letting the two girls cry on his shoulder. Sillin coughed, gaining the blonde's attention. I don't want to be rude, but is there another reason you want to leave tonight? He asked. Naruto nodded. Yes, there is. I want to be sure I completely lose the Death Knights. If they are on their way here, we cannot risk it. You said it yourself that you cannot take down 5 at the same time. He replied to the mage's question. Sillin nodded. It would require at least 20 of our best to take 5 at the same time, he admitted. Very well, we will pack our things and leave now, he said, turning around and walking towards the exit. Naruto looked down at the girl and tightened his hold on them. He lowered his head a little and whispered in their ears. Go and get ready. Take all your stuff and meet me back here, he said to them, kissing them gently on their heads. The girls nodded and moved away from Naruto. They whipped their tears and turned around, leaving the tent. Naruto sighed and turned around and looked at the remaining people, Sylvania and Niles. The blonde smiled at the two. The night elf woman walked over to Naruto and stopped in front of him. The blonde raised an eyebrow. Naruto, she said, do take care of my sister and don't break her heart, she said seriously. The blonde nodded. Don't worry, Yoruichi, she's safe with me. I give you my word, he told her as the woman nodded and smiled. Naruto, Niels said, gaining the blonde's attention. Yes, he asked. I want you to know that everyone here in Refugee Point came to respect you greatly, she said as the blonde smiled under his mask. I want you to know that whenever you are in trouble, look for us, call us. We will come, she said. Where are you going with this? Naruto asked, catching the hint in her words. The princess wants to marry you. That means that you will become king. When that happens, if that happens, we will become your army without any questions asked, she said as she bowed down. Niles? The blonde asked, shocked. The people of Stromgardy will gladly accept you as their leader if you promise that once you become our king, you will return Stromgard, keep to us, and help us rebuild it, she said as she kneeled down in front of the blonde. Your deeds speak highly. The princess acknowledges you and trusts you more than life. You have proved to be a capable warrior and a great leader. We will gladly become your followers. We will fight at your side and die at your side now and forever, she said seriously. Naruto looked at the woman before him and couldn't help but blink in wonder. He had never had anyone, absolutely anyone, say this kind of words towards him. It was new to him, it was shocking, it was beyond belief. He didn't know what to say, what to do. An entire army would gladly accept him and follow him for just a promise, one that he will have to keep. Niles, the blonde said, this is too much to think. I don't know if I am suited to be a king or anything like that, but Phinia trusts me, he said, so I can't let her down. Therefore, if I do become king, I promise you that we will take Stromgard back and we will return it to its former glory, the blonde declared with a grin. Many thanks, Lord Naruto, the woman said as she stood up. My men will forever remember you, and we will forever follow you. You don't really have to, the blonde said, scratching the back of his head, embarrassed. I made a promise and I intend to keep it. Even if I don't become king, I will still help you get the keep back, and even if I have to work by myself, I will help you rebuild everything, he said with a grin. The woman grinned back and bowed down. Many thanks, Lord. Please don't call me that. Naruto deadpanned. He didn't like to be called so formal. He was no lord, he was no important person. You could say he was just a peasant in this world. As you wish, but keep in mind, if you ever need our assistance, feel free to call for us, she said as she left the tent. Naruto sighed. Pretty popular you're becoming, Sylvania admitted as she giggled. Yeah, I never thought things would turn like this, he said as he started walking towards the exit. By the way, where is Nightwalker? He asked. The same place you left him, of course. I fed him while you were gone, but please, next time, warn us before you disappear with my sister, she said with a small laugh. Naruto turned towards her and grinned. He then turned towards the exit and started walking. "You are coming with us, right?" he asked. "Of course my sister is with you. While I trust that you will protect her, I still want to make sure she will be safe," she said sternly. Naruto nodded as he left the tent. He then started walking away until he reached the stables. He nodded at the guards who saluted him with respect, making him feel better for some strange reason. He liked this kind of attention. He wanted it to last. The blonde entered the stable and looked around. He spotted the druid's lightsaber sleeping in a corner. "Nightwalker!" Naruto called. The cat's ears moved at the sound and its eyes opened, scanning the area. They rested on Naruto. Nightwalker stood up and stretched, yawning loudly. It then walked towards the blonde and started moving around him, purring like a cat and making Naruto chuckle. "You missed me, didn't you?" he asked as the cat placed its head on his shoulder. "Come on," Naruto said, putting his hand on the cat's head. "Let's find the girls." Nightwalker made a sound of agreement and lowered its body, letting the blonde climb up. Naruto got on the cat's back and said Cat stood up and started walking out of the stables slowly. As they got outside, Naruto took a deep breath, enjoying the night, and looked around as the cat continued walking for both of them. There was nothing out of order. He could see the organization members mounting up and preparing to leave. Naruto stopped in front of the tent he and the girls shared. A few seconds later, Phineas and Seiya came out wearing their armors. Phineas was wearing a long priest robe with blue stripes coming down from her shoulders. She had a pair of green gloves, blue boots, a necklace resembling a leaf tied to her neck, 2 rings on a finger each, and green cape with blue edges. She held the staff that Naruto had given her. The girl smiled at the blonde, who smiled back at her. He then turned to look at Seiya and see what she was wearing. It shocked him a little. The girl had a metallic chest armor that covered her assets, yet showed them really good. The armor stopped above her belly. Her pants were made out of leather. They had a light brown color. She had a long cape-colored green in the middle and black on the edges. She wore black gloves and a pair of black boots. Tied to her back was the bow Naruto had given her not long ago. The blonde smiled at her as well. Naruto looked up in front and saw Sylvania approaching on top of her own lightsaber and the rest of the organization members. He looked at everyone and saw that they were all ready. Then he looked at Sylvania. The woman tossed a backpack towards him, which he caught with ease. He opened it and found his remaining scrolls inside. He grinned and placed the backpack inside a container. "All right, I will take care of Phineas," Naruto said as he told Nightwalker to lean down. Phineas then positioned herself behind Naruto and strapped her staff to her back. "Come on, Seiya, you're with me for now," said Sylvania as the girl got on her sister's lightsaber sitting behind her. "So where to?" asked Sillin. "Wetlands, Menethil Harbour. We will take a boat to Dustwallow March from there." The blonde replied to the mage, who nodded. Naruto then told Nightwalker to start moving, and the fox did as it was told. Sylvania moved next to the blonde while the organization members moved behind him. As they were making their way out of the camp, Naruto and the rest of the group was surprised when they saw that every single guard and soldier lined up and started saluting the blonde as he was passing. As they reached the end of the long line of soldiers and at the exit of the camp, they saw Niels waiting for them with Gerrit and Ozlight next to her with a grin on his face. He was holding something in his hands wrapped in silk. The blonde stopped in front of them and raised an eyebrow. The marshal walked over to Naruto and raised the item he was holding up to him. The blonde raised an eyebrow and took the item in his hands and took the wrapping off, revealing a sword. The sword had a brown hilt and golden endings resembling an eagle's wings. At the bottom of the hilt there was a small diamond-coloured blue. The blade was large and it looked powerful. There was also a strange red glow around it. The blonde curios moved his finger towards the glow and was amazed when he felt heat radiating from it. He looked at the martial curios. "That sword served me well in my time, while I was just a private. I feel you can have it as a token of appreciation," he said. "But I didn't do anything," the blonde said, amazed. Ozlight shook his head. "You killed 2 syndicate leaders that were giving us a lot of trouble and protected the princess no matter what. You deserve it," he said with a smile. "Thanks," the blonde said, looking at the sword. "It's enchanted," Ozlight said, making Naruto's eyes widen. "The enchant will make the sword burn anyone on contact, fry the enemy's skin and clothing," he said with a pleased grin. Naruto grinned back at the marshal. "Thanks, it means a lot," he said as the marshal nodded. "Take care, Naruto, and take care of the princess as well," he said with a bow. Naruto nodded and sheathed the weapon. He then strapped it to his back and started moving forward. He nodded again at Niles, who saluted back, and once he passed her, he ordered Nightwalker to dash away towards Menethil. It was a good thing that Druid travelled a lot, because Nightwalker knew the roads now and there was no way he could get lost when the cat was with him. The blonde looked behind and saw the rest of the organization members following him and Sylvanir with Saya not far behind. He looked past the group one last time at the camp and smiled. He met a lot of interesting people and made some friends. He never expected for someone like them to accept him like that. It made him feel happy, he had no doubts. There was no way he was going back home now. People needed him here. 10 riders passed with great speed over the bridge leading towards Menethil Harbour. The dwarf guards blinked as they saw that. The riders passed like lighting by them. It's like they were in a hurry or something was chasing them. The guards looked at each other and then at the port city gates and then back at each other. Shimmering winds. One of them said, "Aye, always in an hurry," the son replied, shaking his head. Naruto looked at his surroundings, at the buildings and at the guards patrolling the streets. There were more guards now due to the fact that it was the middle of the night. Everything was different now at night. There weren't so many people out and the port city seemed peaceful and different from the busy commercial point it was during the morning. The group made their way towards the boats, more precisely towards the one that was ready to depart to Kalimdor. As they reached a large boat, the group stopped and Silin got off his horse and walked towards a crew member that was checking some crates. The man heard Silin approaching and raised his head to look who it was. His eyes widened as he saw the mage. Naruto learned during their trip to Menethil that the Shimmering Winds were well known and respected by the Alliance. How can I help you?" the man asked, looking at the mage. "Do you have free cabins for 10 people?" asked the mage. "Yes, we have. Do you desire to reach Dustwallow Marsh?" he asked. Silin nodded. "Yes, we want to get there," he replied as he put his hand in his pocket and took out a small bag filled with coins. "We will pay a lot for our safe arrival there," he said. The man looked at the bag and then turned around. "Captain!" he shouted, and a muscular man walked down from the boat on the docks. "What is it?" he asked. "These people desire to reach Dustwallow Marsh and will pay good," the crewman said. The captain looked at Silin. "We were preparing to leave. We have free cabins," he said as he turned around. "Come on board," he told them. Silin nodded and threw the small bag to the captain, who caught it with ease. Naruto got of the lightsaber and then took Phinia in his arms and helped her down. He then took out the container and looked at the cat that was growling at him. The blonde laughed nervously as he looked at the lightsaber. "I swear I won't forget to bring you out once we reach shore," he said. The cat seemed to accept the promise and disappeared in the container. Naruto placed the container in his pocket and took Phinia's hand. He then looked to see where Saya was and saw her walking towards him. The blonde grinned and took the huntress's hand as well and walked on board the ship. Phinia moved her free hand behind her head and covered her face with a cowl. Her silver hair could be seen coming out of her cowl. The girls and Naruto walked on board and looked around. Naruto looked at the organization members and noted each one. There was Silin, the leader of the group, a human mage. There was Tirasvez, the night elf rogue, Kulian, the gnome warlock, Hindus, the human rogue, Hemastos, the dwarf warrior. He wasn't much of a talker, and Chejin, the human paladin. The last two didn't talk very much, and Naruto was glad that Chejin wasn't an arrogant bastard like the first paladin he met. Silin was a man in his early 30s. He had brown hair. He had a strange collar-like armor around his neck. He wore a light blue robe with many designs on it. His shoulder pads were like 3 in 1. There was a pad over another sustained by magic. They were floating one above another. They were also coloured in a light blue. His gloves were light blue, and his gloves' fingers were brown. His shoes were light blue, and he had a staff in his hands with a strange circle at one end, moving clockwise and crystal floating above it. Kulian had a black cowl over his head. Naruto had never seen his face. His shoulder guard had spikes coming out of it, and strange white particles could be seen coming out of them. His gloves looked like claws, and like his shoulder guards, they were coloured in a dark blue colour. His robe was a mixture between black and gold and had a skull in the middle. His shoes were black. Naruto had never seen the warlock with a weapon so far. He presumed he had a dagger. 2. Hindus had the same armor that Reza had the last time Naruto had met him. He had 2 daggers strapped to his waist. One was leaking green substance, poison. and the other was leaking fire from what it seemed. Hermastos wore the same armor as the dwarf, Von. He had a shield on his back with the design of a dragon's head, and it was coloured black with red lines. His sword resembled a scimitar. Chajin, like Kulian, the blonde had never seen his face. His face was covered by a plate helmet that seemed to be made out of crystals. His shoulder pads were a light purple and had crystal shards floating above his shoulders. His braces were thicker than anyone's and had a crystal embalmed in them. His gloves were light purple, his chest armor had a blue crystal over his stomach, and the armor itself had a strange design. His pants continued the chest armor's design, and his boots were surprisingly earthly brown. He had a large hammer strapped to his back. 3. Let me show you the free cabins, the captain said, motioning to the group to follow him. The group descended on the stairs until they reached the dormitory level of the ship. The captain told them that all the rooms are free since no one usually travels at night, and after that, he left. Naruto moved to the first room and opened the door. Like in the first boat in which he had travelled, the room was fairly big and had 2 beds. The blonde walked in, followed by Phinia. "Princess, are you going to stay with him?" asked Silin, somewhat confused. "Of course I am," she said, smiling. "He is my boyfriend, mine and Seiya's," she replied with a giggle. "Besides, I trust him fully," she told the mage, as she took the blonde's arm and held on to it. The blonde smiled and placed his hand on her cheek, making her smile and lean her head on his hand. "All right, take care of her," the mage said as he started walking away. "You don't mind if I stay here, right?" asked Seiya, walking in. The blonde and Phinia looked at her and smiled. "Of course not," giggled Phinia. "Sure you can stay," the blonde said as he extended his hand to the night elf. The huntress smiled and took the hand and walked in. "Sis, don't forget him," said Sylvania as she passed by the door. A few moments later the panther's head appeared. "Seven!" called Seiya. "Come here," she said, placing her hands on her knees. The panther walked in and purred as he moved near its master's feet. The girl giggled at petted her pet. "All right, you two, get comfortable," the blonde said as he closed the door and locked it. He then walked to one of the beds and sat down, closing his eyes and taking a deep breath to relax. Naruto proceeded to take his weapons off and place them on the table. He then took his mask off and placed it on the weapons. He took his shoes off and got on the bed and leaned in it, closing his eyes and sighing tiredly. He couldn't wait to sleep a little. He opened his eyes as he heard a metallic sound. He saw Seiya working on her chest armor. He raised an eyebrow. "What are you doing?" asked Naruto, looking at her. The girl raised her head and smiled. "Taking of my armor? You don't expect me to sleep with this on me now, do you?" she asked, giggling. Naruto's eyes widened. "Wait, do you—" He stopped asking as the girl removed her chest piece, revealing a bra. The blonde sighed. "What's wrong?" she asked. "I thought you didn't have anything under that," the blonde replied with a shrug. Seiya blushed. "Unlike other night elves, I wear a bra under my armor," she said, looking at the floor. Naruto nodded and turned his head towards Phinia. The girl had removed her cowl by now, and she had placed her staff near the table. She then stretched and then looked at Naruto and smiled. "How long will it take us to reach Dustwallow?" Naruto asked. "Up to 5 days, depending on the weather," replied Phinia. "Why is that?" she asked. Naruto shrugged. "Just curious," he admitted. "Where will I sleep?" asked Seiya, still standing in the same spot. Phinia looked at her and Naruto did the same. "You could sleep with Phinia," the blonde replied. The girl in question thought of something and grinned towards the blonde. "Better yet, you could sleep with Naruto," she said, making the boy look at her. "We can take turns. One night I sleep with him, and one night you sleep with him," she said. "Okay," the huntress replied happily as she leapt towards the blonde's bed. Naruto sighed and got out of the bed, letting Seiya sleep near the wall. While the huntress got in bed, Naruto walked over to Phinia and sat on his knees in front of her. "Sleep well, my love," he said, giving her a kiss on the lips, which she returned. "You too," she replied. The blonde stood up and walked over to his bed, which he was now temporarily sharing with Seiya. He got in the bed and covered himself and the huntress with the blanket. Once that was done, he turned his head towards the girl, who moved as close as she could to him. She moved her head close to him and captured his lips in a small, passionate kiss. As they broke the kiss, Seiya placed her head on his chest and wrapped her arms around him. "Sleep well, my huntress," said the blonde, wrapping an arm around her waist and pulling her closer to him. He could feel her breasts press on his stomach, making him blush in the process. And Seiya as well. You too, Foxy, she replied. Once again, the blonde thought he heard her purr. He chuckled, thinking that she could purr. Naruto started moving his hand on her bare back, excluding the bra's fabric, of course. As the girl moved her head on his chest, her cayenne hair fell on the blonde's chest as well. Naruto never did say it, but he liked her hair a lot. He moved his hand on her head and stared, passing it through her hair. He was happy to be in this world. The blonde kissed the girl on the head, making her move her head on his chest in pleasure of the contact. The blonde moved his hand back on her back and continued trailing her skin, sending shivers down her spine. She liked the feeling. It made her feel very good. She raised her head slightly and kissed the blonde's neck, making his smile. She then started moving her nose on the blonde's neck, making him shiver in delight. Grinning, the blonde turned to face the wall and grabbed the girl by her waist and pulled her up to his level. The blonde looked in her eyes and moved closer, kissing her on the lips and then pulled her body close to his. Once they broke the kiss, Naruto put his nose on hers and smiled. She smiled as well as her hands started trailing his chest. They opened their eyes and looked at each other again before kissing once more. Once they broke the kiss for the third time, Seiya placed her head under his neck and snuggled close to him. I love you, Naruto, she said quietly, like whisper. She said it with all her heart, and it warmed the blonde inside. I love you too, Seiya, he said, surprising the girl and making her smile wide and hold him tighter. This was the first time he had told her that he loves her. It made her very happy. The blonde held the girl tight in his arms, enjoying the warmth coming from her. He closed his eyes and let himself succumb to peaceful slumber. He wouldn't want to trade his life for anything now. He had what he always wanted, someone to love him. Two girls loved him deeply, and he loved them both with all his heart. He would protect them to the very end. Naruto sighed as he looked out the window. They had been at sea for 4 days now. He had slept in the same with both girls, each taking turns. He enjoyed those nights and the feeling of waking up and seeing one of the two girls in his arms. The blonde looked down and turned around. He crouched down and looked at the panther. Seed Panther looked back at the blonde and tilted its head to the side and then yawned. Naruto grinned and started scratching the animal on the head, making it purr. He stood up after that and turned to look out the window once more, wondering when they will reach shore. He felt a pair of arms wrap around him and he turned around and saw Phinia there. The blonde turned around and kissed her on the tip of her nose, making the girl giggle in response. How long till we reach land? Asked Naruto. The girl shrugged. Don't know. What, you getting bored with us? She asked playfully. No, I just felt the urge to fight something and kill, he said, making Phinia look at him surprised. I think Kyuubi is to blame for this. What? Killing isn't bad, the fox countered. So slaughtering an entire village isn't bad, the blonde deadpanned. Might I remind you that I was controlled and that slaughter is at a whole other level than normal killing, the fox replied with a huff. Naruto? Phinia asked, seeing the distant look in the blonde's eyes. Oh, sorry, had a small talk with Furball, the blonde said with a grin and ignoring the obscenities the fox was throwing at him. Hey, guess what? Seiya called as she entered the room and made Naruto and Phinia turn and look at her. What? Asked the blonde. The captain said that we will reach shore in 30 minutes, she replied with a smile. Naruto grinned as he broke the hug with Phinia. All right, let's get ready then, he said, taking his mask from the table and placing it back on his face. He then proceeded to take his weapons and strap them to his waist. Finally, he took the sword Ozlight gave him and strapped it to his back. Once he was done, he turned around and saw that Seiya was already ready. She was holding her bow in her hands and Seven was standing next to her. He then looked at Phinia and saw that she was also ready. Cowl was over her head, masking her face, and the staff in her hands. The blonde nodded satisfied and walked to the door. He opened it and stepped out, followed by the two girls and the panther. The small group made their way up to the deck, and once they reached it, they looked around, trying to spot their destination. The blonde looked with wide eyes as the city of Theramore appeared. He could see a light tower to the right side of the walls, a massive tower in the middle of the city, a keep near the tower and a large dock with many ships. The blonde looked behind and saw that the rest of the organization members were on the deck waiting to reach shore. He looked around and spotted Hindus sitting on the ship's edge with a fishing pole in his hands. The blonde blinked in wonder. The rogue was sitting on the edge of the ship fishing. He didn't mind the fact that the wind was blowing hard and it could throw him overboard. Naruto shook his head. Some of these guys were really strange. A few days ago, he found out that the paladin and the dwarf had gotten drunk and started dancing on the cantina's tables. The leader of the group, Silin, was looking at them and shaking his head. Sometimes Naruto saw him slap his forehead. The other members just laughed at their comrades. As the boat reached Theramore's docks, Naruto and the rest of the group walked of the vessel and onto the docks. The blonde looked around and saw guards patrolling the docks, but unlike the Stormwind guards, this one's had white plate armor and a tabard with the design on a golden anchor on it. There were other people around as well, working on the docks, repairing ships, moving crates on or out from ships. The blonde saw Silin walk towards the tower and started following him with the rest of the group. As they left the docks, they headed straight towards the Griffin Master. As they got there, Silin walked to the dwarf and started talking with him, while the rest waited for him to finish. Once he was done talking, he turned to the group and took a deep breath. "All right, the Griffin Master said he will give us griffins to ride to Tanaris, but he has only 5, he said. 2 people on a griffin. That isn't too bad," said Hindus as the rest agreed. "All right, we will go like this. Hindus with Tyrosves, Sylvanir with Chejin, Kulian with Naruto, Hemastos with Seiya, and I will ride a griffin with the princess," the mage said. "I can ride a griffin," said Finia. "Yes, but you don't know the way to Tanaris," replied the mage. "Yeah," Finia said, looking down and blushing. "All right, everyone follow me," he said as he entered the griffin stables. As they went inside, they followed the Griffin Master that showed them 5 griffins. Naruto followed the warlock and let Kulian get on the griffin's back first. He then mounted up, and the gnome turned the griffin and hit it lightly, telling it to move towards the exit. As they got outside, Naruto saw that everyone was coming out, and then, when he saw Silin take of the rest of the members, ordered their griffins to take off. In a matter of seconds, Naruto was experiencing riding the griffin once more. He looked down at the ground as they were flying and saw that they were flying above a swamp. Dustwallow Marsh, in other words. He could vaguely see humans down there and other creatures. It wasn't long before Kulian turned the griffin and started flying above the water passing by the mountains. It wasn't long, and Naruto could see the desert appear in front of him. The griffin turned right and passed over what looked like a small port and then started flying above the sands. Naruto looked around. The sand stretched as far as the eye can see. There were mountains to the right and left, and the sea was behind them. In front of them, Naruto could see a large jungle, or at least he could see the top of the trees. He read about that area, if he remembered correctly. That was on Goro Crater. Naruto felt the griffin started to descend and looked down to see where they were. He spotted a large city. The buildings were made out of stone. There was a wall surrounding the city and a few towers along the walls. But what surprised Naruto was the fact that goblins patrolled the city and that the goblins were the guards. He had never seen a goblin up until now. The goblins were small green creatures, long pointy ears, almost like a night elf's, only longer. They had a leather vest on them, leather pants and gloves. A club in their hands, but said club had spikes coming out of it. The goblins were as tall as a gnome, maybe a bit taller. As the griffin landed on the ground, Naruto got of the creature and walked away a little. He took a small container out of his pocket and moved his hand over it. Nightwalker appeared out of the container. The saber yawned and then stretched before looking at the blonde. Naruto took another container out, and from it he took a piece of meat, which he gave to the hungry animal. The saber gladly accepted it and started devouring the piece of meat. "Naruto," Silin said as he walked over to the blonde, "I am going to take the princess to the hiding place with the rest of the guys." "What about me?" asked Naruto. "I have a mission for you," he said, looking at the blonde. What do I have to do?" asked Naruto, looking at the man before him. "We have a member here in Tanaris, but we lost contact with him some time ago. His name is Malaron," the mage replied to the blonde's question. "You want me to find him, right?" Naruto asked. The mage nodded. "Yes, and I want you to take some jobs from the city." "Why is that?" asked Naruto, raising an eyebrow. "You need to get stronger for what has to come. Take jobs and started working on them. Once you become stronger, we will teach you everything we know and everything you can learn," the mage replied. Naruto thought for a second. It wasn't all that bad. "All right, sir, but once I find this Malaron, how do I find the hiding place?" he asked. "That's simple. Tell Malaron to come with you to the treacherous sands," replied the mage. "From there he will know where to go." Naruto nodded and looked at Seiya and Sylvanir. "You two are going with them?" he asked. They shook their heads. I'm also going to take some missions here and help you out, said the huntress. You know what I don't understand? Phineas said with a pout. Why can't I stay and work with Naruto and Seiya? She asked. Don't worry, we will handle jobs from Steamweedle Port. The mage replied. Besides, we are in neutral territory. Horde passes here as well and we can't let them see you, he told the girl who pouted again. You know, it's not fair. You think I'm weak or something? She asked with a glare. Silin started waving his hands in front of him. That's not true. We are only thinking of your well-being, he said. Finya, Naruto called, making the girl look at him. The blonde walked towards her and stopped in front of her. He is right. We can't risk having you exposed, he said, putting his hand under her chin. But I want to help you, she said sadly. Naruto smiled. Don't worry, you will later. Get strong while I search for this Malaron, all right? He asked as the girl sighed and then nodded. Come back safely, all right? She said as she lowered the blonde's mask a little and placed a kiss on his cheek. Don't worry, I will, the blonde said as he turned around and started walking inside the city, followed by the saber and the two night elves. As Naruto passed the wall and entered the city, he looked around trying to figure out where to start. They told him that Malaron disappeared in Tanaris, but they didn't tell him where exactly. Maybe they didn't know as well. Naruto started walking towards the tavern. From what he learned from the druid was that in the tavern, you can get a lot of answers. As the blonde reached the tavern, he saw a familiar figure looking over a map. Naruto's eyes widened when he realized that the familiar figure was none other than Zagak. Grinning Naruto walked over to him. The druid, feeling that someone was approaching him, turned his head and his eyes widened when he saw Naruto. Naruto? He asked, shocked. What are you doing here? Zagak! Shouted Sylvanir as she ran to him and entangled him in a hug. Sylvanir and Seiya too? He asked. What brings you to this distant place? He asked, curious. We had a lot of trouble, Naruto said. That I know. You weren't at the hiding place when I got there, the druid said calmly. But you were right to leave. The Scarlet Crusade could have caught you if you didn't, he said. Naruto nodded. Yeah, but anyway, our troubles just continued after that. Do tell, Zagak said, pushing the night elf warrior of him, or at least trying. When he saw that she wouldn't move, he sighed and placed his hand on her shoulder and looked back at Naruto. The blonde started telling him what happened after he and Phineas reached Refugee Point. The druid was shocked to learn what he had passed through, that he had been through the monastery, that the undead captured him and the girls that loved him. He went wide-eyed when he heard that the princess was sharing him with Seiya. He was surprised when he heard that some of the guys from Plaguelands were here. Naruto, where is Silin and the guys? He asked. He went with Phineas to the hiding place here, and they will take missions from the port to the east of town, he said. The druid nodded and then looked back at the map. What are you doing here? And why didn't you come search for me and Phineas? He asked. When we got to the hiding place, we found out that the Crusade stole from us. Over 10,000 gold pieces and some valuable weapons. He then looked up at Seiya and saw the bow. I see that the bow is in good hands, he said. Naruto laughed. Well, I thought that I should try and learn how to use a bow, and took it from the rack. But I gave it to Seiya, figuring it would help her more, he admitted. It's a good thing that you took it. It's a valuable item. Did you by any chance take a staff as well? He asked. Naruto nodded. Yeah, Phineas has it now, he replied as the druid nodded. Good. Well, after we found out that the items were stolen, we started tracking down the one that stole from us and recovering every single thing that was stolen, the druid said, scratching his head. And how much did you recover? Asked Naruto. Everything. Leader and the rest of the team is somewhere here in Kalimdor, replied Zagak. So what are you doing here? He asked again. Leader sent me to Silithus to contact some members that are there, he replied. Why is that? Asked the blonde. Classified, but I can tell you that a storm is coming, he said, looking at the blonde seriously. You need to be careful from now on. I don't know what else can happen. If what you say is true, then Kel'Thuzad won't stop at nothing to find you, he said. Don't worry, I'll watch my back, he said with a grin. Good. Take care of Nightwalker for me, all right? He said as he scratched the saber behind its ears. Sure will, Naruto replied. Also, you said you were looking for Malaron, right? The druid asked as Naruto nodded. If you want to know, last thing I know is that he was searching through the desert near the mountain over there, he said, pointing towards a strange mountain that was at the east of the city. What is that place? Asked Naruto. The caverns of time, but take my advice and stay clear of it, the druid said. Why is that? Asked Naruto, curious. You aren't ready to go there. Not yet, he said as he closed his map and placed it back in his pocket. The druid then turned around and started leaving. He raised his head up, saying goodbye. Sylvania looked at her sister and smiled. She then turned around and started walking towards the druid. Sis, where are you going? The huntress asked, making the druid stop and look at the warrior. Going to help Zagok. Naruto, take care of my sister, she said with a smile. And don't do anything perverted, she said, laughing as the blonde started choking on the air he was breathing. I don't think it's wise to come with me, Zagok said as the woman called for her lightsaber. I think it is, she said, mounting up. Get on, she told the druid. Zagok shrugged and got on the lightsaber's back. The woman waved to her sister and Naruto before dashing away with the druid. In a matter of seconds, the two disappeared from view. Naruto looked at the huntress and placed his hand on her shoulder, making her look at him. Come on, let's find something to do and find that Malaron, he said. Chapter 22, time, -2 days later. Damn, this is annoying, a blonde teen said as he was walking through the desert and panting. He glanced at his companion and saw her grinning at him. He sighed. You should take of that mask and armor then. Don't know why you wear black in the middle of the desert, the girl said, giggling. And I still don't know why you wear revealing clothes. Armor, the blonde said, glancing at his companion, or more like towards her chest. The girl giggled as she placed her hand under the blonde's chin and raised his head to look in her eyes. Though I see that you like what you see, she replied slyly. The blonde coughed as he looked away. Well, like any other man, I guess, he replied with a shrug. You know, if someone else had said that, and if someone else had looked at me like you did, that someone would have died, the girl said dangerously, making the blonde gulp and sweat a little. Not the sweat from the sun and heat, though. But since it's you, Saya said, grabbing the blonde's arm and pulling her body close to his. You can look all you want, she whispered in his ear. The blonde felt the blood from his nose coming out at the thoughts he was having. He shook his head and started cursing a certain pervert for convincing him to read those damn books. If Jiraiya hadn't told him that his books will use in life later on, Naruto would have never opened one. Now he regrets, or at least his innocent part and what's left of it, regrets it. Naruto, the girl said, looking at him as they were walking. The blonde tiredly turned his head towards her. Not that he was tired of her, more like the goddamn sun and heat. Yes, Saya? He replied with a smile. Can I take your mask off? She pleaded. It's not like there are any enemies around, and unless they have this big telescope, I doubt they will see your face in the middle of the desert, she said with a smile of her own. The blonde sighed. She had been nagging him to take his mask off since yesterday, but he was having a hard time telling her no. Fine, the blonde said, defeated. The girl grinned as she moved her fingers towards his mask and gently pulled it, revealing his face and whisker-like marks. The girl started moving her fingers gently on his whiskers, making the blonde shudder in pleasure. As the girl continued to move her fingers, she turned her head around and glared at the sand. Her hand stopped moving and she stopped dead in her tracks. Her companion Seven became alert. What's wrong? Asked Naruto, turning around. The blonde looked to see where she was looking and saw the sand move. He tensed, wondering what it was. To his relief, a scorpion came out of the sand and started moving away. Now at first, when he saw these scorpions, the blonde was completely shocked. They are bigger than a goddamn rat and more dangerous than a normal scorpion. As the creature started moving away from the two adventurers, Saya turned towards the blonde, relaxed, and smiled. How did you know there was something behind us? Asked the blonde, curious. As a hunter, I have heightened senses and I can feel creatures or enemies before they even strike, she replied, looking at the blonde. Naruto nodded and then grinned. He turned and started walking again. The huntress ran after the blonde, and once she caught up with him, she started walking next to the blonde. From time to time, she would look at him and try to grab his attention for something. Naruto still didn't figure out what it was. She would catch the blonde as he would stare at her while they were walking. Most of the times, Naruto would be caught staring at the girl's chest, watching how the sweat trails down from her neck towards, all right, you obviously know. Still, it seemed like Saya didn't give a damn. It looked more like she enjoyed the attention, though she enjoyed making the blonde feel embarrassed each time she caught him in the act of staring. They had been out in the desert for 2 days, and it seemed like Naruto wasn't faring very well, mostly because of the dark clothing. Saya remembered when the blonde started hallucinating and when the sand projected a mirage in front of him. She didn't know what he saw, but it was related to ramen and a stand she had never heard of. It was quite funny seeing the blonde what he would try to do. She had to put it to a stop, though, when he tried to eat sand with a pair of bones. Naruto hated that recent memory. He hated the sand, and for the first time, he hated the clothes he was wearing. Black was a no-go in the desert. That was a sure fact. Too bad no one told him that he should get a different armor or some other clothes. The blonde sighed in frustration. Still, he had to admit that he liked the idea of traveling in the hot sun with Saya. "Say, Naruto, we just killed 40 ogres, right?" Saya asked, putting her hand under her chin. The blonde nodded. "Yes. The guy from Gagetsan wanted us to kill 40, why do you ask?" The blonde inquired. "Well, the ogre camp is behind us, but to the south of Gagetsan, yet we are walking towards the east of the ogre camp when we should have walked towards the north," she said, making the blonde's eyes widen in horror. "You mean to say that we are going in the wrong direction?" He almost screamed at the revelation. The girl nodded. "Yeah, I think so," she replied. The blonde's head dropped. "I knew I should have taken a map. Or asked for one," he said with a sigh. The girl giggled at him. "Don't worry, maybe we will find some information on Malaron by going this way," she said, trying to cheer up the blonde. Naruto blinked. "Yeah, I guess you're right," he said with a grin as he kissed the cayenne-haired girl on the cheek. The girl brought her hand to her cheek and smiled. "You're welcome, Foxy," she said with a giggle. "All right, let's see where this road leads," the blonde said vigorously for some strange reason. The two of them, plus the huntress's companion, continued walking through the sand and under the hot sun towards the east to explore. Naruto looked in front of him as a strange mountain formation could be seen appearing. He looked at them carefully, wondering what was there. He then looked at his companion and saw she was looking at the ground in thought. He shrugged and looked back at the mountain formation and scratched his head. He could recall someone telling him that there was a place in Tanaris where only the strong should venture. He sighed. He couldn't remember what the place was called or where it was. Though he had Kyubi, and the fox would tell him if he was going somewhere bad and if he should turn back before he could get his ass handed to him. Seconds passed, they turned into minutes, and then the minutes turned into hours. The two heroes, plus the cat, continued walking towards the east, getting closer and closer towards the mountain formation with each passing step. The blonde was getting a strange feeling, like there was something inside there that was calling for him. He thought he could hear someone call him. Naruto shook his head and looked at his girlfriend. She too was looking at the mountain curiously. He then turned his head away and looked at the mountain and started scanning the area. He saw what looked like an entrance, a passage to enter in the middle of the mountain chain. The blonde turned towards the passage and started walking. Saya looked at the blonde and ran after him. As she got near him, she looked at him and saw he had a serious expression on his face. It was like he knew that there was something here, or at least he suspected something. She looked back in front of her and continued walking. As the two passed the passage, they found themselves in a strange place. The mountain was surrounding them. There was only one entrance and exit, the one they just came through. Around them stood a large number of structures, from Alliance towers to Horde towers, from Alliance structures to Horde ones. Boats, bones, weapons, everything was scattered in the area. In front of them was a road that led in the mountain towards a large door from what it seemed. The blonde was about to move when he felt a powerful wind blow behind him, but it was strange. It was like something big was breathing in the back of his neck. Slowly he turned his head and looked behind him. His eyes widened when he saw a dragon, a big yellow dragon. The creature's eyes were locked onto him and they were looking down on him. Naruto gulped as he took a step back and took Saya's hand in his and moved her behind him. The dragon looked at the blonde and scanned him thoroughly. It then looked at the huntress and scanned her. His eyes then moved back at Naruto. The massive creature then leaned down on its stomach and lowered its head, resting it on its paws. The dragon huffed, blowing sand away in the two travelers' eyes. "Who are you and what are you doing here?" the massive dragon asked. The blonde looked up at the dragon. The dragon had what looked like a beard coming down from its lower jaw. It must mean that the dragon was pretty ancient, or old in other words. The second thing he noticed was that the dragon had small horn coming out from between the nose and the eyes, and then two large horns coming out of his head going in the back. In between them, going down the neck, were smaller horns. His eyes were green. piercing in one's soul, and his tail had spikes at the end. His wings were big, very big. The blonde gulped a second time. Who are you? He asked slowly. He didn't want to get in a fight with this one. I am Anachronos, guardian of the caverns of time, and you, child, are too weak to enter, the dragon said in a deep voice as his eyes pierced in the blonde's blue eyes. This is the caverns of time? Asked the blonde, looking behind him intrigued. He then looked back at the dragon. Why can't I enter? He asked. Responded the dragon. Naruto raised an eyebrow. What do you mean by that? He asked curiously. I know what happened in the past, what happens in the present, and what will happen in the future, Anachronos said as he looked up at the sky. At the same time, I know each and everyone's destiny, he replied, looking down at the blonde again. You know everyone's destiny? Asked Naruto, raising an eyebrow. Does that mean you, let's say, know my destiny? He asked. Yes, I do, replied the aged dragon. Naruto's eyes widened as he heard that. You, my boy, your time of death is coming, the dragon said in a monotone voice. Wait, what? Asked Naruto, alarmed. I don't think I heard you right. You said, my time of death is coming, he asked. The dragon slowly nodded. Yes, you heard me well. Your time is coming to an end, said Anachronos. The blonde looked down in shock. A part of him believed what the dragon had just said, but he wasn't sure if it was all true. He felt Seiya wrap her arms around him, and he placed his hands on her, holding them tight, like he was afraid to let go and lose everything he had just found. If you say is true, when will I die? Asked the blonde, looking back up. Before I help Phinia get Stormwind or after? He asked seriously. It is not my place to say. We are not allowed to divulge information about the future, the dragon replied. Then why did you tell me I was going to die? Naruto asked, confused. It has been decided for you to know. You play a great role here, little one, a role that cannot be played by anyone else. Anachronos replied solemnly as he looked at the blonde. Then I do not see the point of you telling me that I will die, the blonde said again. If you seek the answer to your question, I advise you to step inside the caverns and search for Zaladormu, the dragon said as he stood up, ready to leave. But how will I know how to find him? Asked the blonde. He is easy to spot. He will be right in front of you, apparently sleeping. Walk to him and talk to him, Anachronos said as he raised his wings and started flapping them. In a matter of seconds, he was in the air, hovering above the mountains. The blonde looked up at the flying dragon and then looked towards the entrance. He felt Seiya take his hand and hold it tight in hers. The blonde replied by holding her hand tight, as well as he started walking towards the large entrance. He could feel the huntress look at him, but he didn't look back to see what was wrong. Seiya, for her part, she was scared when she heard what the dragon said. She knew who Anachronos is, and she knew that what he says is always true. She was afraid to let go of Naruto now, afraid that she might lose him. She held as tight as she could and moved closer to him, in a way to protect him from the outside world. As the two reached the entrance, they saw a dragon hovering above the ground, flapping its wings. Unlike Anachronos, this one didn't have a beard, and he was smaller, much smaller. Maybe he was younger than the dragon hovering above the area. The blonde carefully walked over to the dragon and slightly bowed his head. Could you tell me where to find Zaladormu? He asked as he looked at the dragon. Seed Dragon landed on the ground and leaned down. Hop on, I shall take you to him, the dragon replied. Naruto looked skeptical. Are you sure? He asked. The dragon nodded. Yes, do not be afraid, child. I shall not harm you, and I am here as a helper for all those that seek to enter the caverns, he replied. Naruto nodded and walked over to the dragon. He turned towards Seiya and helped her up on the dragon's back. He then hopped on behind the girl and placed his hands around her waist. Seven also jumped on the dragon, deciding to stay behind Naruto. As the dragon saw that they were in position, he raised from the ground and lifted his wings. He started flapping them, slowly raising from the ground, then he turned around and started flying down in the cavern. As they were flying, Naruto and Seiya looked around. They were amazed with what was inside. The walls seemed to be cracked in some places, leaving empty space where what looked like space itself was moving. Just like a river would flow through the mountains, down the hill, so did this space. Naruto could see what looked like stars in the dark and purple river of space. He was mesmerized by it. He could sometimes see other planets. He wondered if what he was seeing was real or just an illusion. But it all seemed real. He looked at Saya and saw she was amazed as well. It was obvious that she had never seen or heard of these things before. It didn't take long and the group reached the end of the cavern, a large oval room big enough for 5 Hokage towers to be built on top of each other. Looking towards the ceiling, Naruto saw about 5 dragons hovering, flying in random directions, like they were guarding the area. He looked down and saw something strange. Down on the ground stood massive creatures, 5 times bigger than a human. They looked like dragons. Only difference was that they were standing up on 2 legs like humans and they had no wings. They had a large tail with spikes, 2 horns on top of their heads and spikes coming down from their neck towards the end of the tail. They had a strange plate armor that covered their chest and shoulders and a large axe in their hands. They looked like guardians of some sort, but the strangest thing was the ceiling. It didn't look like any cave ceiling, it looked like space itself, stars everywhere, space dust moving from location to location, stars sparkling in the distance. And the dragons flying there, it was like he was in another world. In the middle of the room stood a large clepsydra, a golden one. It had many glass parts, each filled with sand falling down at the bottom. The clepsydra seemed to measure the time of the world. Slowly the bottom was filling, but it seemed like all the sand that was there had taken millennia to fall down. Even down there was a lot of sand in the clepsydra. It seemed like the bottom will never end anytime soon. In 4 different spots of the room stood 4 statues, each in every spot. The statues itself resembled a man with a robe that covered his entire body, holding a 2-handed sword. The sword was pointing down towards the ground, and the statue's eyes seemed to glow a strange color. Naruto felt the dragons starting to descend. In a matter of seconds, they were down on the ground in front of the largest dragon he had ever seen. He was even bigger than Anachronos. But the only difference from him was that this dragon was transparent, almost like he was a ghost or a spirit of some sort. Naruto helped Saya to get off the dragon. Seven jumped down and landed next to the blonde. Naruto thanked the dragon, who started moving away. He then turned towards the transparent dragon and looked at it in awe. It seemed to be sleeping. Remembering what Anachronos said, he started walking towards it. As he got closer, 2 of the dragon guardians raised their axes and moved towards the blonde. One of them lowered it in front of the blonde and sneered, making the blonde take a step back in surprise. "That will not be necessary." The blonde heard someone say. He and the guards looked at the dragon, who was slowly raising his head. "Uzumaki Naruto," the dragon said. Naruto's eyes widened as he heard that. "You know my name?" he asked, surprised. The guards moved away and resumed their previous position. "Indeed I do. I know all that is past, present and future, just as Anachronos," the dragon replied, as he raised his head high. "Anachronos sent to, so I may have a question answered," replied the blonde as he looked at the dragon. "But first, yes, I am Zaladormu," the dragon replied, cutting the blonde off and startling him at the same time. "As I said, I know the past, present and future," the dragon's voice echoed through the cavern. Right, then about my question," said the blonde, only to be interrupted again. "Yes, you shall die when we shall not tell," replied Zaladormu, as he looked at the blonde. "Why not?" asked Naruto, now getting angry. He hated when people told him something, but only half of it, and then not telling him anything else. The world is built on a certain balance. If that balance is broken, the world will shatter. The dragon replied, "There are certain events written in the stars," he said as he looked up at the ceiling. "Our meeting was supposed to happen. I have been waiting for you, Naruto," he told the blonde as he looked back at him. "You waited for me?" he asked, surprised. "This was supposed to happen?" he asked once more. "You mean that all I have done so far was supposed to?" "There are those that were supposed to, but there are those that did not supposed to," Zaladormu replied, and then continued as he saw the puzzled look on the blonde's face. "The sealing of Kyuubi inside of you was fated, was supposed to happen, your life was supposed to happen," he said, taking a pause, "but it could have changed." "Changed?" asked Naruto, raising an eyebrow. The dragon nodded slowly. "Yes. Changed. If someone had desired to adopt you, the wheels of time would have turned and the events would have changed. Everything you do, every decision you take, turns time for the worst or for the right," Zaladormu replied in a deep and mystique voice. "You see, young one, if you had fallen before our meeting, the time would have changed. You and your destiny would have been replaced with someone or something else. But there are those such as you that cannot be replaced. the dragon said slowly. What do you mean? The blonde asked. You just said that if I were to… I know what I said, young one, the dragon interrupted. It was just an example. Let me give you another. If one seeks power and attains it, but then seeks to destroy the world with it, we interfere. Zaladormu replied, we change the curse of time so as heroes would rise to defeat the evil and stop the destruction of the world. Why would you do that? Asked Naruto, puzzled. I thought you were not allowed to do such a thing. The end of time is set in stone. It cannot and will not be changed. We will not allow that, Zaladormu said, raising his voice a little, becoming more fierce. But returning to your question, young one, I cannot tell you when or how you shall die, he replied as he leaned down again. Naruto was about to say something when the dragon started speaking again. But I have a proposition for you, Zaladormu said slowly. A proposition? Asked the blonde. Yes, the dragon replied with a nod. I shall grant you one wish that will not endanger the world, if you will not die, said the dragon. But I don't know when I will die. I could die tomorrow and I may not know, said the blonde, puzzled. How am I supposed to pass your proposition if I don't know when? That is the test. Find out, survive death, and come back to me. If you do that, I shall grant you one wish, Zaladormu replied. Naruto looked down in thought at what he was proposed. To survive death and have a wish granted, he already knew what his wish was, but how was he going to survive death if he didn't know when it would come? It was too hard, he didn't know what to do. He looked at Seiya and saw her looking at him with worry in her eyes. The blonde smiled and placed his hand on her cheek. She closed her eyes and leaned on his hand, enjoying the warmth. The blonde then looked back at the dragon and sighed. All right. If I pass and you shall grant me one wish, then the only wish I have is that Phinia would be able to live as long as me and Seiya, to have the same lifespan as us, he said with a smile as he looked at the huntress and taking her in his arms. The dragon looked at Naruto. The blonde thought he saw him smile. Very well. Your wish will be granted as long as you survive. Take care and may the gods be with you, he said as he turned his head away and closed his eyes, falling asleep from what it seemed. The blonde looked at the sleeping dragon and sighed. He then looked at Seiya, who had her head on his shoulder. He smiled and snuggled closer to her, holding the girl tight in his arms. He could feel the worry coming out of her. Thanks to Kyuubi, he could feel some emotions. He rubbed her back gently to reassure her that everything will be all right. The blonde heard footsteps getting closer towards them. He opened his eyes and looked around. His eyes rested on a man that was approaching him. The man looked to be around his 20s. He had short brown hair and brown eyes. He had a golden plate armor and shoulder pads. On his back was a sword glowing purple and with a tint of red. The man had a tabard that Naruto recognized. It was the same as Zagark's. Well, that was impressive, boy, the man said as he stopped a few meters away from Naruto and smiled. Seiya turned her head and looked at the newcomer carefully. You're with the Shimmering Winds, Naruto stated as the man smiled and nodded. Are you by any chance Malaron? He asked, and once again the man smiled. Yes, I go by that name, the man said casually. Are you looking for me? He asked curiously. Naruto nodded as he let go of Seiya and moved towards the paladin. Sillin sent me. He said they lost contact with you, he replied. The man put his hand under his chin and looked at the ground. Well, I've been here for some time helping with the Black Morass problem, he replied, closing his eyes. I never thought that it would take me that long. Black Morass problem? Asked Naruto, raising an eyebrow. The paladin nodded, keeping his eyes closed. The Black Dragonflight was trying to alter the timeline in the past, and the Keepers asked for my help, so I granted it. The paladin replied with a shrug, and then sighed. I guess that now we need to head back. Where is everyone? He asked, opening his eyes. At the hideout here in Tanaris, replied the blonde. At the treacherous sands. Malaron nodded in understanding. All right, I guess, he said with a sigh. Come on, let's go and sleep. We can't go right now, he said, walking away. Why not? Asked Naruto, raising an eyebrow. It's getting dark, and it will be goddamn cold outside. I don't want to walk through an iceberg, the paladin replied, as he continued walking. Naruto looked at Seiya, who looked back at him. He then looked at Malaron and started running after him with Seiya in tow. It wasn't long and they reached him and started following him. A few minutes later they arrived at a house that seemed to be built in the wall of the cavern. There was a man outside sharpening a sword. He nodded at Malloron, who nodded back and stepped inside the house, followed by the two travelers. "Who was that?" asked Naruto. "That was a dragon," replied the paladin casually. "A what?" the blonde asked, or almost shouted as he heard that. "A dragon of the bronze dragonflight, the ones guarding this place, or you could say, the good guys." Malloron replied with a smile as he went to a room and opened it, revealing about 10 beds. "There are very few that sleep here, but this inn was brought here through a space distortion. This entire room is ours. We will sleep here for the night, and then tomorrow we will start our journey back home," the paladin said as he walked to a bed and sat down. Naruto nodded and walked to a bed, followed closely by Seiya. He sighed and sat down on the bed, which was next to the paladin's. He looked up and saw that the huntress was looking around in the room. The panther had already jumped on a bed parallel with Naruto's and was sleeping. The blonde smiled and leaned down with his back on the bed. He stared at the ceiling, pondering what he was told. Truth be told, Naruto was now scared of the future. He didn't want to die and leave everyone. He had just found everything he ever wanted, and he was going to lose it all one day, maybe even tomorrow. He sighed as he placed his hand on his chest. He could feel his heart beat fast. It was aching him and it was hurting him at the same time. He didn't want to feel this anymore. It was too painful. Suddenly, the blonde felt a hand on his. He opened his eyes and found himself staring in Seiya's own light blue eyes. The girl moved her body above his and gently placed one of her hands on his cheeks and started moving it. The blonde closed his eyes and sighed. His aching was slowly going away and his heart wasn't hurting him anymore. He opened his eyes again and looked at the huntress. She was wearing nothing apart from her purple bra and panties. The blonde had gotten used to this in the past 2 days. He smiled at her and placed his hands on her waist and pulled her down on his, capturing her lips with his, sharing a passionate kiss. As they broke, Seiya raised her head and looked at the blonde. She placed her hand on his cheek again and smiled. "Don't worry, we are here. Everyone will back you up," she said reassuringly. "I am sure that once Zagark hears of this, he will be next to you all the time to make sure you survive. The organization will surely teach you great things so you can survive," she said with a smile on her face. The blonde smiled in return. "You know, you're very beautiful when you smile," he replied, as he kissed her again and made her giggle. The blonde then moved Seiya of him and stood up. He took his armor and weapons off and looked at the paladin. His sweat dropped when he saw that the paladin was already sleeping, and he was already out of his armor. He wondered when he took his armor of. Nonetheless, the blonde didn't pay much attention. He turned around, he saw Seiya standing on the edge of the bed in a alluring way and smiling seductively at the blonde. Naruto grinned and got in bed, placing his hat on the girl and moving it on her almost bare skin, sending shivers down her spine. The girl closed her eyes in pleasure and moved closer to his warmth. She placed her head on his chest and started moving her hand on his stomach. "Naruto?" she asked silently. "Yes, my huntress," the blonde replied silently as well as he kept moving his hand on her back. "I was wondering, She tried to say something, but she kept pushing her head on his chest like she was embarrassed or something. "Something wrong?" the blonde asked, worried. She shook her head. "Never mind, it was nothing. It can wait," she said as she placed her hands on the blonde's chest. Naruto shrugged and took her in his arms and covered themselves. He kissed her lightly on the head and placed his head on top of hers. He closed his eyes, slowly drifting to sleep, though his sleep will not be very pleasant now with the revelation of his upcoming death. The next morning, Naruto felt strange. He couldn't feel the warmth from Seiya coming towards him. He slowly opened his eyes, wondering where she was. He saw that the girl wasn't in bed anymore. He stood up and rubbed his eyes. Then he turned his head towards the paladin's bed and saw said paladin on the floor doing push-ups. 200, 201. The blonde heard him count, and his eyes slightly widened when he heard the number. The paladin must be strong, if he could do so many. Feeling a pair of eyes on him, the paladin turned his head towards Naruto as he was doing the push-ups, and smiled. "Good morning," he said. "Your girlfriend is outside talking with the dragon to sharpen her polearm." "Polearm?" asked the blonde, raising an eyebrow. "She never told me she had one." "That's because I rarely use it," said a new voice, and the blonde looked at the door. Seiya was standing there, holding a polearm in her left hand. The blade was sharpened, it was long, and it looked deadly. "Why not?" asked Naruto, as the girl walked in the room and stopped in front of Naruto. She bent down, showing her cleavage to the blonde, and kissed him on the lips. I just don't, she replied as she stood up. She was wearing the same armor from before, and the same pants, gloves, and boots. She took a container out and sealed the weapon inside. Saya then turned towards the blonde and sat on the bed with him and leaned towards him, placing her head on his shoulder. You should get ready. We will leave soon, she told the blonde as she rubbed her head on his shoulder. The blonde smiled at her and kissed the girl on the head. She moved her head away as the blonde stood up and walked to where he left his armor. He started getting dressed and tying his weapons to his waist. He then took out his container in which Nightwalker was and turned to Saya. Hold on to him, he said as he gave the container to her. Why is that? Asked the girl, raising an eyebrow. Naruto laughed as he scratched the back of his head. I forgot to let him out yesterday. He might be angry at me and he will surely jump me and beat me to a bloody pulp. The girl giggled at him and took the container, placing it in one of her pockets. Don't worry, I will talk with him and he will understand, she said with a smile. Thanks, the blonde said as he kissed her on the cheek and then placed his mask on his face. All right, you two, follow me, the paladin said as he was standing at the door, ready to leave. Once again, Naruto wondered when he got ready. It was like he was moving with the speed of light or something. The three heroes left the inn and started walking up towards the exit of the cavern. As they were walking, Naruto looked behind him where Zaladormu was sleeping. Even now he could hear the dragon when he talked. Even now he could feel his gaze on him. It scared and it reassured him at the same time. Shaking his head, Naruto turned his attention to the task at hand and continued walking. A few hours later, we find the travelers walking through the desert. The sandstorm, even though it wasn't too powerful, wasn't favorable for running while on a mount, as you could get lost easily. However, Naruto couldn't help shake the feeling that death was now stalking him, that it was round the corner as they say it. He kept glancing around and he was on constant alert with everything that was happening around him. He hoped that nothing will happen, but it wasn't after him. He saw Malaron raise his hand up, signaling them to stop. He was looking around very seriously as though he sensed something. It was then that Naruto heard footsteps, a lot of them. He thought that it was from bandits. There were a lot of bandits here. A day ago, they tried to kill him and take Saya for some fun. They died fast. No matter how many, they were Naruto, and Saya killed them with ease. But now, something was amiss. As the blonde kept staring in front of him, 3 figures could be seen emerging from the sandstorm. Behind them more than 50, around them 3 more and more than 50 accompanying them. The blonde looked up in front again and his eyes widened in horror when he saw who was there. In front of him stood 3 Death Knights, the same Death Knights that he thought he had gotten away from. Behind them was a vast army of skeletons, zombies and ghouls. He looked around, 3 more Death Knights to his left, to his right and behind him. He saw Malaron shaking. He could smell the fear coming out of him. He knew that he couldn't take on such an army, and he was afraid. Naruto smelled the fear coming out of Saya, as well as she moved closer to him. But it looked like she was shielding him. She was trying to protect him. The blonde looked at her with compassion. He was touched by her gesture. Come with us, one of the knights said towards Naruto as the blonde turned his head towards them and glared. Ha! If you think I will come, then you are wrong, the blonde sneered. We shall drag you back if necessary, save the useless bloodshed and come with us. The knight said once more, trying to convince Naruto to come peacefully, though he did want to shed some blood. It was that Kel'Thuzad was getting impatient by the minute. Naruto heard a sword being taken out from its sheath. He turned towards Malaron and saw he was in a fighting position, though he could see his hands slightly trembling, though his position was defiant. The paladins seemed to want to fight and not let them take whatever they wanted without a fight, even though he might die. Naruto unsheathed his weapons and got in a fighting position as well. He started twirling his dagger on one finger as he held his sword in front of his face and glared at the knights. Saya, seeing all this, took her bow and moved behind Naruto and placed her back on his as she took an arrow out and placed it on the bow and started pointing towards the knights behind Naruto. The knights looked between each other for a few seconds and then back at Naruto. I see, have it your way, the same knight said once more as he extended his hand towards Naruto, and the undead army started marching towards the 3 heroes while the knights stayed put. Light, purge them, the paladin shouted as he extended his hand towards a group of skeletons and fire shot towards them and started burning them and destroying them. Bring me the brat, the knight ordered as the army charged forward. Seiya pulled her arrow back and fired. Naruto, seeing this, passed through a few hand signs fast and multiplicated her arrows. Now instead of 1 stood 100. The arrows hit multiple targets. Zombies and skeletons fell on the ground. The skeletons, some shattered and never got up. Others slowly were rising back up. The zombies, however, would fall on the ground and die. Naruto extended one of his hands towards a group of skeletons and fired a fireball. He added Kyuubi's chakra to the attack. The result was a powerful fireball that shattered through the ranks of the undead and created a rather large hole in the ground. He turned his hand towards a zombie that was getting close to Seiya and rooted it. Seven then appeared and mauled it. He turned towards another zombie and used moonfire on it. The blonde then saw the army getting closer. He moved away from Seiya's back, leaving a clone behind, and charged towards the masses. He created 50 more clones, and they all started attacking, slashing left and right, kicked, punching. They used everything they could, from melee attacks to spells and jutsus. The blonde spun around, taking 3 ghouls' heads off. He then ducked, avoiding a sword, and kicked the skeleton away. Then he placed his hand on a zombie's head and fired a frostbolt through its skull. Unknown to the ground, the Death Knights started walking toward them. Slowly, they all drew their swords out at the same time. The sandstorm started dying out, and then, when it died, a Death Knight blurred out of everyone's sight, only to appear next to Naruto, slamming his fist in the blonde's face and making his fly through the masses of undead, outside the fight. The rest of the knights started running towards the blonde. It seemed like the undead army was to keep his companions busy while they deal with him. The blonde shook his head and groaned as he slowly stood up. He opened his eyes and narrowed them. He ducked, avoiding a sword, and then jumped away, avoiding another. Naruto! He heard Seiya shout after him. He was in deep shit. 12 Death Knights were around him. It wasn't looking good. The blonde spun around and started channeling the energy Terasvis had told him about. He assumed a defensive position and waited. 3 knights came at the same time, making the blonde's eyes narrow. He moved to the left, avoiding a strike. He ducked, avoiding another. Then he blocked the last sword. He spun around and took his dagger out and moved it to hit the Death Knight. Unfortunately, the knight was at a whole different level than him. He managed to avoid the dagger and kick the blonde in the ribs, making his grunt in pain. The blonde raised his head and glared. He charged and started moving his sword and dagger left and right, up and down to cut the Death Knight or stab him. The knight was proving a worthy adversary, but Naruto saw an opening. Channeling energy, he pushed the dagger towards the knight and stabbed him in the ribs. Then he spun around, taking the dagger out, and kicked the knight in the face and made him fly away while spinning. The blonde landed on his feet and dropped down, avoiding a sword. He then kicked the one behind him, or at least tried. Another Death Knight appeared and grabbed his leg. He raised him up and started spinning him around and then let him go. The blonde flew in the middle of some skeletons, breaking them apart. He shook his head and jumped up. He started growling. "All right, you asked for it," the blonde said as he bit his thumb under his mask and started doing hand signs. "Summoning Jutsu, Kyuubi no Kitsune," he shouted as smoke appeared next to him, and a powerful demonic energy was felt that even the dead stopped in their tracks. "Well, well, well, what do we have here?" a voice said sinisterly. "A party, and I was just invited to take part in," the voice said again as a dark laughter could be heard. It then turned into an insane one. As the smoke died down, everyone could see a strange man wearing a bloody red cape with cowl standing next to Naruto. His hands had claws. His razor-sharp teeth could be seen under his cowl. 7 fox-like tails swishing behind him. A pair of pointy ears could be seen under the hood. The man raised his head a little. One bloody red slitted eye could be seen and a sinister smirk. "It's been some time since I fought like this, and I hope you make my fight enjoyable," he said as flames started appearing out of nowhere and materialized into a sword in his left hand. Without a warning, the man blurred out of vision and appeared behind a knight, cutting him in half from the waist. As the upper body started dropping and blood started flowing out, the man could be heard laughing insanely. "Give me more blood!" he shouted in glee as he charged forward, slamming into a knight and making him fly away. The blonde turned around and blocked a sword. He then pushed the sword away and kicked the knight. He turned around and ducked, avoiding an attack. He threw his dagger up and summoned a clone. They both jumped away and started forming something in the blonde's hand. The blonde started charging forward. When he got closer to a knight, he slammed the sphere in him. "Rasengan!" He shouted as the knight flew away and a large trail was left behind him. The blonde turned around and jumped in the air. He caught the dagger and landed on the ground behind a knight. He spun around and tried to slash him, only to have the attack blocked. The blonde tried to retaliate, only that before he could do anything, the knight spun around and raised his sword with the flat end. He raised it with all the power he could muster, and the result was deadly. The sword hit the blonde's arm, the arm which held the dagger. The bones moved upwards and the blonde shouted in pain. At the same time, a howl of pain was heard, and QB was thrown away with force. The blonde jumped away, dropping his dagger, and grabbed his arm. He grit his teeth and pulled the bones back together. He howled in pain once more as he started glaring at the knight. He stood up and took the sword in both hands and charged forward. As he was about to reach him, a knight appeared from his left. The blonde jumped away and raised his weapon, blocking an attack. He was about to charge back, a death knight slammed into the blonde's target, making him fly away, and QB appeared above the death knight he had thrown. "How dare you!" shouted the fox demon, rage evident in his voice and eyes. "How dare Kel'Thuzad steal from the Fox clan!" he shouted as he grabbed the knight and tried to throw him away. To Naruto's amazement and horror, the knight spun in the air and landed behind the demon and kicked him hard in the ribs, making fly away, crashing in a nearby rock and leaving a trail of dust behind him. QB jumped back on his feet and glared hard as he kept gritting his teeth in anger. "How dare you steal from me?" the demon fox shouted as he charged forward with great speed and slamming into the death knight. A large pillar of dust rose to the air as the demon collided with the knight. When the smoke cleared, to Naruto's amazement, he saw that the knight was at par with QB. But at the same time, QB had only 5 tails. Something was wrong. The blonde was shaken out of his thoughts as he felt someone behind him. He jumped away, avoiding a sword. Then he raised his sword and moved it towards him, enemy, to slash him. The enemy blocked the attack and tried to kick the blonde. However, Naruto used a substitution and changed places with another death knight that was trying to cut him from the behind. As a result, one death knight had his skull cracked, and the other was kicked away with force. Naruto turned towards QB once more and saw he was being thrown away viciously. The QB shook his head and raised a finger up. He then placed it on the ground, and a wave of power shot towards the death knight, pushing him away and a large part of the undead army. At the end of the wave, the power exploded, throwing dust and pieces of bones and meat everywhere. Naruto had to cover his eyes. As the after effects died down, the blonde looked at Naruto and saw him smirking, but now he had only 4 tails. The blonde then felt something cold pierce through him. He looked down as he was choking on his blood. A sword was coming out of his stomach. He looked behind and saw a death knight there. He could hear Saya scream in horror and Kyuubi roar in anger and pain, but he didn't understand why in pain or anger. The knight then grabbed the blonde, took the sword out and threw him away. He landed a few feet away. A few seconds later, QB appeared behind the knight and ripped him to shreds, but the fox demon now had only 3 tails. Naruto looked at his wound and saw it was healing fast. Surely QB was working on his, even if he was out. He stood up and tried to charge again, but a howl made him freeze in his tracks. He looked up at the sky and saw a skeleton dragon flying towards him. The blonde swore and tried to swap place with something, but the dragon wasn't after grabbing him. The pile of bones stopped a few meters from him and flapped his wings, making Naruto break his concentration and cover his eyes and face as the sand was blowing towards him. Before he could even react, the dragon moved down and grabbed the blonde, raising him in the sky. As he was flying away, it seemed like he would escape anymore. However, QB didn't agree with that. The fox started shifting. He became bigger, taller. He turned to his true form, a massive fox with 9 tails, only that 7 out of the 9 were transparent, almost like they didn't really exist, like they weren't real. QB pounced towards the dragon and slammed it on the ground. One of his tails grabbed Naruto before any damage came to him. The fox started slashing and ripping the bones from the undead dragon. He was shattering the bones to make sure that it would never come back to life. However, a sharp pain in the head made him stop what he was doing and start howling in pain. Naruto also started yelling. The fox looked down at the blonde, saw strange purple chains moving around him and reinforcing the seal, making him go back inside. He looked around and saw the lich from before, from Andorhal. He roared in anger as he tried to pounce at him, but he vanished before he could. The blonde dropped on the ground unconscious as 2 Death Knight approached him and lifted him up, then making their way out of the sand. Chapter 23. You scratch my back, I scratch yours. Everything was blurry. The light of the sun was washing over his eyes, making it hard to see, though he could distinguish 3 people around him. They were moving. He was moving. It seemed like he was lying on something and carried somewhere. He looked around, he thought he saw something. Mountains to his left, the desert and a massive crater in the middle of the desert. He looked at one of the men. He looked back. Everything was blurry, he couldn't distinguish anything, and before he could, something hard hit him in the face and he succumbed back to darkness. He opened his eyes once more. He stared at the darkening sky. He could see a shooting star pass overhead. He looked around once more. They were still moving. His vision was clearer now. He could see much clearly. He looked down at his legs. They were chained. He looked up at his hands, and they were chained as well. Looking back down, he saw the Lich from Andorhal. He couldn't remember his name. In front of the Lich stood 2 Death Knights. It seemed like they were guarding him. The blonde smelled something rotten. He looked back to see who was dragging him or the contraption he was on. 2 abominations. It was their rotten stench that filled the air. He looked back up at the sky. A skeleton's face appeared in front of him. It was studying him. Then it looked around and something grabbed his head and threw it away. Naruto closed his eyes, feeling weak and sick. Maybe the abomination's stench was weakening him greatly. He succumbed to darkness once more. He could hear fighting. He opened his eyes slowly and looked down at his feet. The Lich was firing spells around him like he was trying to hit something. The blonde looked to his left and saw a Death Knight pinned to a tree, his arms ripped off and a massive axe holding him in place. The blonde looked down at the Lich again. Fireballs and arrows were hitting him from everywhere. It seemed like someone saw the undead army and was now attacking it. The blonde saw as a massive fireball hit the Lich and made him move back a little. Finally, several lightning bolts hit him, and he raised towards the sky. Then in a bright flash of light he disappeared, and dust was scattered in the air. The Lich was killed, and from the sounds of it, the fighting had stopped. The blonde tried to look around, but he was falling asleep once more. His head was hurting. He couldn't stop his eyes from closing. The blonde opened his eyes and realized that he was being carried. Someone was holding his arms and dragging him through what looked like a jail or a prison. He looked around and saw many bones, skeletons of people chained to the walls. He saw Alliance members in prisons. He even saw some Horde members. He looked up, to his left, towards one of his carriers, trying to see who it was. All he could see was a black armor, a rogue-like armor. But it looked different. It was ripped in some places, and the blonde could see bones. Surely this rogue was a Forsaken. Before he could do anything, the ones carrying him stopped, and he heard a cell door open. He was thrown inside a cell, and the door closed behind. The blonde shook his head as he tried to stand up. He realized his legs and hands were chained, and then another chain was connecting the leg chain with the arm chain. He looked back at the cell door. It was composed out of bars and one door. He could see past the bars. The rogue and 3 warriors, 2 of which seemed to be the guards of this place. They had polearms in their hands, a helmet that covered their entire face, but with no particular design, just a T-shape at the front of the helmet, so that they can see, breath, and speak clearly. They had plate armor and the Horde tabard. The blonde turned his body until he was sitting on his butt and looked at his jailers, wondering how he ended up in a Horde prison. Last thing he remembered was that the Scourge had managed to take him down and were delivering him to Kel-Thuzad, or something like that. He shook his head and looked at the last warrior. From the tall stature and the position he had, it seemed like he was a blood elf, male or female. He couldn't deduce. The helmet that completely covered his face didn't show much, and the armor, black with red-colored, covered his or her entire body. The rogue turned towards the guards and started speaking in a language Naruto had never heard. The guards seemed to understand him and replied back. While they were discussing, they kept pointing towards the cell, to him to be more exact, and then towards another place. At one point, it seemed like the rogue said something that upset the guards, because they raised their polearms and were ready to strike. The 3rd warrior stood quiet during the whole ordeal. It was strange to say, at least. Finally, it seemed like they had reached an understanding, and they departed. Only the guards remained that assumed defensive position to the sides of the cell. Naruto sighed and decided to check with Kyubi and see if he can do something about this. The blonde entered his mind and walked towards the fox's cage. As he got there, he looked around. Normally Kyubi would appear at the bars when he would enter his mindscape, but this time he wasn't appearing. "Kyubi?" asked Naruto as he looked around inside the fox's cage. He walked over to the bars and grabbed them. He moved his head inside and looked around. He could hear something inside the darkness of the cage. Curious, the blonde stepped in, behind the bars, and started walking towards the source of the sound. "QB?" he asked again. But once more there was no reply. He walked in the darkness with no fear. He knew that the fox was on his side now, so there was no real danger. As he reached the area from where the sound was coming, the blonde was greeted by a sleeping fox. Naruto watched as the great Kyuubi no Kitsune was sleeping on the wet floor. But there was something strange. His breaths didn't seem very even. He looked around and saw that the fox had several wounds that were healing. Looking back at his face, he realized that he must be sleeping to heal his wounds and the wound he received from the sword. Deciding that there was nothing to do here, the blonde turned around and started leaving. Once he was outside the cage, he left his mindscape. Naruto opened his eyes in the real world and saw that the guards had brought him food and water. Naruto tried to stand up. He found it hard. With great effort, the blonde managed to stand up and slowly walk towards the bars of the cell. Taking one step at a time and dragging his feet slowly so as not to fall, the blonde managed to reach the bars. He then slowly sat down in front of the plate with the food and looked at it. Just by looking at it, the blonde felt his stomach turn. He realized that this must be the prisoner treatment. The blonde looked away and pushed himself from the dish, deciding to take only the cup of water. The blonde pushed himself to the far end of the cell and sat there, in a dark corner. He sighed as he looked up at the guards. They didn't seem to give a shit about him or anything like that. Not that Naruto cared about it. He looked back down at the floor, trying to figure out how to get out of this, to formulate an escape plan or something. He closed his eyes and leaned on the wall, thinking. He spent hours trying to figure out something. The chain that held his legs and arms seemed to be enchanted, or seemed to have some kind of spell because he couldn't use his chakra to break them. Hours and hours he thought, but with no avail. He finally fell asleep, thinking of a way to escape his predicament. "Hey, wake up!" a deep voice ordered as a pair of blue eyes opened. Naruto looked up to see who was waking him. It was an orc. The blonde closed his eyes and then opened them again in confusion. "How come I can understand you?" he asked as he looked at the tall green creature in front of him. The orc snorted as he looked at the blonde. "No, there are those that know your pathetic language. In the past, we tried to communicate with your race to reach an understanding, but you wouldn't listen, and most of us decided to drop learning how to speak your tongue," replied the creature as it stood up straight and peered at the blonde. "And why do you speak it?" the blonde asked curiously. Again, the orc snorted as it looked away. "Sometimes we try to reach an understanding with your pesky humans, but just like before, we reach shit," he replied, as he looked back at the blonde with feral eyes. "Now get up," he ordered. The blonde, not wanting to anger the creature further and get beaten now as he couldn't retaliate, started getting up. Slowly he tried to get up on his feet, but the chains were proving to be a bitch. The orc seemed to have been a short-tempered one as it growled and grabbed the blonde by the hair and raised him up. Then he set him on the ground on his feet and sneered. "Next time, move faster," the orc ordered sharply as he moved his hand down and grabbed the connecting chain and turned around. Without a warning, the orc started moving away while dragging the blonde after him. Naruto was having a hard time standing up and moving without falling. With each fast step he took, he would lose balance and almost fall down. The orc didn't seem to give a shit as he walked out of the cell and then down the prison's corridor towards God knows where. As he was being leaded away, the blonde spared glances around him. He tried to find a window or something, but they seemed scarce in this place. Though when he saw one, he could see the light coming inside the corridor. Clearly it was morning or something like that. He couldn't deduce it exactly. The blonde looked around. Everything around him was dark. The orcs used torches to light the prison. After walking for a few minutes, the orc reached a door and pushed it open. Light moved inside the dark hallway, blinding Naruto. The orc turned towards the blonde and grabbed him by the collar. He then threw him out the door and closed it behind him. The blonde fell face first on the ground. He raised his head and started spitting out the sand from his face. He looked around. He was in some kind of arena or something similar. There were 4 pylons in the middle of the arena. "Stand up, human!" someone ordered. The power from his voice gave him away as the leader, or so Naruto presumed. The blonde did as he was told, not wanting to anger them when he was in a disadvantage. He stood up slowly and looked around. He really was in an arena. There were rows of seats all around him and horde members occupied them, every single horde member. He looked around until he spotted a throne and an orc sitting on said throne. 2 guards were in front of him. They looked dangerous and their weapons as well. The orc sitting on the throne had blue eyes, but they were fierce black hair and a black beard, two elongated teeth coming from the lower jaw upwards just like any other orc in that manner. He had a black with golden armor on him, thick shoulder pads with the same color, and he had a huge and deadly warhammer next to his throne. He was looking intensively at the blonde. "First," the orc said as he looked at the blonde, "tell me what your name is, boy," he demanded as he looked in his eyes. "Uzumaki Naruto," the blonde replied carefully and with a neutral tone. The orc looked around and then at one of his guards who whispered something in his ears. The orc nodded and looked back at the blonde. "Do you know who I am?" he asked. Naruto shook his head. "How should I?" he asked. "Never seen you before," he replied, turning his head away, trying to show he was not intimidated by the glares. "I am War Chief Thrall, leader of the Horde and the Orcs," he replied with authority in his voice, as the Orcs did some kind of chant while raising their weapon or fist in the air. The blonde turned his head at the war chief. He had read about him, and he knew that facing him was certain death. Only a foul would try to fight him head-on. He studied the leader of the Horde with interest. He was powerful. He could feel it. He was no foul. He realized that if he were to insult him, he would sign his own death warrant. He needed to be careful on how he was going to speak with him. "Do you know why you are here?" Thrall asked as he looked at the blonde hero. Naruto shook his head. "I do not," he replied shortly. "You are a prisoner of war." The leader said, making Naruto cringe. He didn't like the sound of that. "We have tried many years to reason with your kin, but they drive us out of our homes. When we find a new home, they try to drive us away from this one as well. They are backstabbers," Thrall growled. Naruto looked down. "I am sorry, I do now know the facts and I do not take part in anyone's side in his matter." He replied seriously. He didn't really give a damn what happened between humans and orcs in the past, but he didn't want to get caught in the middle of it. Even though he was a human, he was an outsider to the world of Azeroth. Naruto could hear the war chief snort as well as other orcs. Despite the fact of how humans treat their prisoners, especially orcs, he growled angrily, "I am willing to treat my prisoners with more generosity," he said as the blonde looked up, wondering what he meant. "But for that to happen, you must entertain us," he said with a grin on his face. I don't like the way that sounds," the blonde said slowly as he could feel something bad was going to happen. Thrall smirked as he looked at the blonde. "Let the fight of survival begin," he shouted as two cage doors opened and 4 wolves jumped out from each one. The blonde looked at the wolves and started sweating. The wolves turned their attention towards the blonde and growled hungrily. "Okay, how am I supposed to fight while chained?" he asked himself as he looked around. Suddenly an idea popped in the blonde's head as he looked at one of the wolves that was preparing to attack. Naruto took a defensive position as best as he could and waited. The wolf lunged forward with its mouth open, ready to bite the blonde. As it got closer, Naruto jumped in the air just enough for the wolf to pass under him. He then landed on the wolf's back. He then turned around and threw his chain in front of the animal and around its neck and pulled hard. The animal started struggling and trying to throw the imposter off its back. It started jumping and turning like mad as it felt itself chocking. But no matter how hard it tried, the blonde would let go, and death soon arrived, taking the animal. As the wolf dropped dead on the ground, Naruto stood up and looked at the remaining 7. He sighed as he saw them all charge at the same time. Naruto jumped up as one wolf lunged towards him. He landed on the wolf's back and then jumped in front of him, landing on another wolf and making the animal crash on the ground. Then the blonde jumped backwards and landed on his palms on another wolf. Finally, using all his power, he threw himself upwards and turned in the air. He then turned around in the middle of the air and threw his chain forward, managing to grab the top of one of the 4 pylons. The blonde groaned as he hit the pylon with his chest. He shook his head and took a deep breath and pushed himself up. He then turned around and sat down on the pylon. He looked down and saw that the wolves were growling and moving around the tall structures. Some of them were jumping in the air as if trying to reach the blonde and bite him or bring him down. Naruto smirked when he saw that the wolves couldn't reach him. Naruto looked up towards the orc leader and saw his left eye twitching. In anger or annoyance, the blonde didn't really know. He heard the crow boo at him and yell profanities. This only made the blonde laugh, as he was actually enjoying this. He then looked at the chain and started thinking how he could break it. Surely there had to be a way. Suddenly, the blonde heard the crowd cheer. He looked around, nothing strange. He looked down and saw the wolves were gone. It made Naruto raise an eyebrow. He looked around the stadium and saw that at one end stood an orc. He had a warrior's armor on him. He looked fierce, and the massive axe he was carrying only made him look fiercer. The orc made eye contact with the blonde. He sneered as he looked at Naruto. Our hero only grinned. He knew that the orc couldn't reach him. There was no way he could. Even if he tried to climb up, Naruto would only kick him in the face and let him drop. Though what the orc did next surprised Naruto. The massive creature pulled out a boomstick, the same one that the dwarfs use. He had seen one in action before. His eyes narrowed as he saw the orc aiming at him and a smirk appearing on his face. The blonde gulped and started looking around for something to use as a shield. There was nothing. Zero. He looked back at the orc just as he fired the boomstick. The blonde's eyes narrowed as he rolled away from that spot falling from the pylon. There was no other way out of that. As he landed on the ground, he looked back at the orc and saw him seal his weapon away. Then he saw him take his axe in his hands again and bend slightly. The blonde knew what was coming. Just as the blonde blinked, the orc disappeared from view. A large trail of smoke was left behind him, and it was getting closer towards the boy. Naruto raised his arms up to his chest. He saw the axe coming down. Just as the axe sliced the chain, the blonde jumped away, avoiding the orc as he moved towards the opposite wall, almost crashing in it. Naruto landed a few feet away from his previous location. He looked back at the orc and saw him turning to glare at him. Naruto sighed as he looked at the massive creature. He was preparing for another attack, only that this time it seemed like he was moving slowly towards said blonde. Once again, Naruto looked around for a weapon or something, but there was nothing. However, due to the fact that the chain was broken, he could now move his hands freely. The blonde looked down at his feet and saw the chain attached to his legs. His left eyebrow twitched as he sat down and grabbed the chain with his hands. The orc stopped moving as it looked at Naruto with interest. In fact, the entire stadium looked at the blonde with interest, wondering what he was doing. The blonde ignored the stares and concentrated on the chain. He channeled chakra in his hands and gripped his chain. He then pulled it and shattered it in the process, making a few eyes go wide. As the chain fell on the ground, the blonde stood up grinning. He moved his head left and right, making a cracking sound. He then punched his knuckles and got in a fighting position. The orc, seeing that the blonde was getting ready for fight, smirked. He wanted to see what he was capable of. The orc charged forward once again with the axe raised. As he got closer to the blonde, he lowered the massive weapon to cut. Naruto jumped to the side and avoided the attack. The orc spun around with the axe, and Naruto ducked, avoiding the attack once more. As the blonde ducked, something caught his eyes. He reached towards the orc and grabbed the hilt of a weapon. Then he pushed forward and moved behind the orc. He moved his arm forward, dragging out a sword. Finally, he spun around and raised the sword to attack. As he lowered the sword towards the orc's neck to seat him, the orc moved his axe and blocked the attack. He turned his head slightly towards Naruto and grinned behind his helmet, though the blonde didn't see. The two fighters jumped away from each other. The orc turned around facing the blonde and charged again. Naruto bent slightly and charged as well. As the two got closer, Naruto moved his sword to the side and the orc as well. They both moved the weapons towards the enemy at the same time, and a clang could be heard all around the arena as the two weapons connected. The blonde then jumped back slightly and moved his open hand towards the orc. "Fireball," he said as fire formed in his hand, and a rather big fireball shot out, making its way towards the orc. The enemy knew of the boy and what he was able to do. He expected this. Just as the fireball got closer, he bent and moved his axe in front of him. The attack collided with the axe, and it exploded, encasing the area in smoke. The blonde stood a few meters away, waiting to see what happened, if the orc was still there. Something jumped out of the smoke towards the blonde, who smirked. Naruto had anticipated this. As the orc started descending towards him, Naruto took a step to the right and avoided the orc. His eyes, however, widened when he saw the axe suddenly move to chop his head off. The blonde raised the sword and blocked the attack. Then something, or better yet, the orc, moved one of his legs under the blonde's and made him trip and fall on his back, socking the blonde. The orc was moving faster than before, had he been holding back. Naruto narrowed his eyes when he saw a fist coming down towards his face. He placed his hand on the ground and used his chakra to push himself away from the attack. He spun in the air and landed on his legs, bent forward. He turned his head towards the orc and glared. The orc slowly stood up and looked at the blonde. A strange red aura started moving around him, and the sand around the creature raised slightly. It was now that the blonde felt the power coming out of the orc. It was way more than the blonde had thought at first. The orc charged forward again, swiping with his axe left and right. The blonde would duck and turn left and right to defend himself from the attack. He knew that if he would raise the sword to block any of the attacks, his might not only lose the sword, but his hands as well. The force with which the orc was attacking was more than he could handle. Still, he groaned inwardly as he realized that he should have known that they wouldn't send someone weak to fight him. Naruto decided to end this. If this went too much, he might lose an arm or something else. He jumped away and started spinning while adding chakra and mana in the sword. He then started mixing the two, concentrating on creating a fireball or something close to it. The blonde felt the sword getting hotter and hotter, and when he felt that he couldn't hold it anymore, he let go, as he stopped spinning. To his and the audience's amazement, a flaming sword, which was spinning very fast, was moving towards the orc warrior. Said warrior narrowed his eyes before raising his axe to deflect the sword. However, something else happened. As the sword made contact with the axe, the entire force from the combined mana and chakra exploded. That made the fire explode, and that made a fire nova which threw the orc away in one of the wall and made the sword drop on the ground. The blonde stood gaping at what he did. He didn't know exactly what the result would be. He knew that he would make an attack with flames, but he didn't realize that he would create something like this. Shaking his head, the blonde moved his open palm to the side and started concentrating. He slowly started creating the Rasengan in his hands. He opened his eyes and saw the orc starting to stand up, slowly. An idea passed through the blonde's head and he grinned. He closed his eyes and started concentrating again. In a matter of seconds, fire started to spiral around the blue orb. As the blonde opened his eyes, he grinned at what he saw. He turned towards the orc that was now back on his feet and charged forward. "Let's see how you handle this," he shouted as he ran towards the orc. Thrall was looking in amazement at what was happening before him. He had never seen anything like that. As the blonde got closer, the orc raised his axe to defend himself. The blonde pushed the orb in the axe. The warrior could feel the power of the orb. He then heard a crack, and to his amazement, he saw his axe was cracking. Before he knew it, the axe shattered, and the attack connected with his chest. He felt hot, and he felt his insides turning. "Flaming Rasengan!" The blonde shouted as the orc was suddenly pushed away with mighty speed, crashing in the wall and ending up outside the arena. Everyone's jaws dropped, and their eyes widened when they saw that the best warrior the Horde had, or the orcs had, was defeated by a human child with an attack they had never seen or heard before. The blonde stood up and turned towards the orc leader and gave him a cocky grin. Then he felt someone behind him. Before he could turn and see clearly who it was, he fell on the ground and started succumbing to darkness. The last thing he saw, however, was an undead with dark and bloody red robes. Naruto groaned as he opened his eyes. He found himself staring at the ceiling of his prison. He sighed. He was back in jail. However, something felt different now. He raised his hands and saw that they weren't chained anymore. They didn't bother to chain his hands anymore. He looked down at his feet and saw that not even his feet were chained. He grinned. Maybe now he would be able to make a run for it, break the wall, and started running out of this prison and back to Tanaris. That shouldn't be too hard. However, he was shaken out of his plans when he heard the cell door open. He looked at the door and saw that it was Thrall standing there looking over him with interest. "You impress me, boy," the leader said calmly. Naruto grinned. "It's what I do best," he said with a sparkle in his eyes. The orc leader grinned as well for some strange reason. "Boy, I have a proposition for you," he said. "Is that why you are here?" Naruto asked, standing up and then taking a seat on his cell bed. The orc leader nodded. "Yes, that is why I am here," he replied. "Before you go to whatever you want to ask me, do tell me, why was I brought here, and how did you find me?" Naruto asked. It had been bugging him for quite some time now. Thrall grinned in a feral manner. "You see, we heard reports of a strange guard that escorted the Princess of Stormwind back home safely and outran my best riders. He said then I heard that the same guard kidnapped the princess." Naruto nodded, bored. "Yeah, and?" he asked, looking at his fingernails. Thrall didn't know, but it seemed like he was trying to annoy him. However, that wouldn't happen as he had a great temper. And I had scouts look for that guardian, especially after I received a report from out undead allies when they said that he escaped from their jail on top of a massive frog that nearly crushed more than 100 soldiers. The orc leader said, amused. Naruto nodded, motioning for the orc to continue. Thrall started walking through the cell while looking at the blonde, his hands behind him. I wanted to find this royal guard. I wanted to see what he was really doing going around Azeroth with the Princess of Stormwind hanging next to him, he said as he looked at the blonde. I also wanted to know why would the strongest Alliance organization would go against the Alliance to help said guard and not return the princess to her rightful place. He finished trailing off. Naruto sighed as he looked at the orc. You know, you sent those riders for a purpose, he said, and when he saw Thrall nod, he continued. You are angry of the alliance her father formed with those bastards, he said, narrowing his eyes. The orc leaders closed his eyes and gave a deep growl. Indeed I am. I might hate the alliance. I might hate the humans, but I would never go as low as them as to ally myself with the worst enemy in history, he said as he opened his eyes and glared at the blonde. Naruto leaned on the bed and looked up at the ceiling. Then you should know that at first I didn't know of them. I saved her from your riders because it was my duty. However, it became personal when I saw what I saw and heard what I heard, he said, glaring back at the orc, momentarily changing his eyes into QBs. However, that didn't even faze the orc from what it seemed. I see, so do tell me why she desired to leave, he asked, knowing full well that the princess couldn't have been kidnapped, and from what the undead had told him she was clinging to her kidnapper and shown him affection and so forth. Oh, said Naruto, looking back at the ceiling and starting to play with his nails. Well, it could be the fact that she also despises the Scarlet Crusade and that she didn't agree with what her father had done. He said casually, she doesn't like them and will never consider them allies. Ever since we ran from there, I was planning a way to one day return and take down the Crusade and give the throne to her as she rightfully deserves. And what of the king? Asked Thrall and narrowed his eyes when he saw the blonde glaring hard at him with demonic eyes. I never told her this, but from the day I saw her father, I knew she no longer had a family, he replied. Thrall looked questionable at the blonde, and then his eyes narrowed. Do you mean that there is no more king? He asked. Bingo, the blonde said with a grin. The current king is just a puppet, the corpse of the king, something is controlling it, or, better yet, someone, he said as he looked back at the ceiling. From the looks of it, you know who it is. A feminine voice said that made Naruto jump from his bed and land far in the darkness of the cell. You, he growled as he looked at the woman. It's nice that you haven't forgotten about me, Sylvana said with a sadistic grin as she licked her lips. What do you want? Asked the blonde. I already told you I will not fight Kel'Thuzad. Oh, and why not? Asked the woman moving in the cell, swaying her hips. After all, isn't he the one currently controlling Stormwind? She asked as she made the blonde's eyes narrow. How did you know? He asked as he looked at the woman with a critical eye. It was obvious. The way you reacted when I first told you who I want you to kill, the reason why you declined the offer or how you tried to move away from it, she said. That doesn't give any information on how I knew about this, the blonde growled. Why I knew? She asked as the blonde nodded. It was simple. On your way to the monastery, you were never alone. I had a rogue follow you, she said as Naruto's eyes widened. Let me tell you what he found, she said with a grin. Flashback, Naruto was racing towards the Scarlet Monastery when all of a sudden he stopped. He looked around as if he heard someone calling him. The undead moved behind a tree silently and waited to see what was happening. Surely the kid couldn't have, seen him. He is much weaker than him. However, he was surprised when he saw another rogue appear in front of the blonde. Razor, the blonde said, dropping his guard. It seemed like the blonde knew who he was. I see you were taken captive. Such shame, the rogue said, shaking his head. The blonde boy growled. Yeah, well, what would you have done when the undead had your girlfriend's hostages? He asked. The rogue shrugged and looked back at the kid. Listen here, boy. I know you have your doubts about the King of Stormwind, am I right? He asked as Naruto nodded. Well, I am here to confirm you something. And what would that be? Naruto asked as he raised an eyebrow. When you saw the king, what did you think? Asked the rogue. The kid seemed surprised of the question but responded nonetheless. Something felt wrong about him. It felt like he was controlled, yet at the same time, it felt as if he wasn't there anymore. In what sense? The rogue pressed on as if trying to see if what the blonde knew was right or wrong. I mean, as if it was his body, but he wasn't there, as if he was dead or something, though I couldn't really figure it out. Replied Naruto, as he looked at the rogue. Razor nodded as he started moving around the blonde. You know, you were right, he said, making the blonde's eyes widen. I did some research, and it turns out that the king is actually dead, killed some time ago. By who? Asked Naruto, as he was following the rogue's movement. Not sure who killed him. I do, however, know who is controlling him, who is pulling the strings, replied Razor as he briefly turned his head towards the blonde. And that would be? Naruto pressed on as he kept looking at the rogue and at the same time was getting mighty impatient. Kel'Thuzad himself. The rogue replied in a deadly tone, making Naruto turn to stone. Now tell me, what did Sylvanus ask of you? He said, looking in the boy's eyes and making said boy shiver. And I want the answer, all of it, he said dangerously as he reached for his weapons. The undead didn't know why, but it seemed like the boy feared this rogue. It was like he knew something about a rogue that made him reply and tell everything. Naruto told all how he was to infiltrate the monastery and then how he was to kill Kel'Thuzad later in his own base of operations. Listen to me, boy, said the rogue as he looked at Naruto. Do not go for that man yet. You are not ready, not even with your spirit inside of you, he said, making Naruto take a step back in shock. How did you? The blonde trailed off. I know, I have a lot of information, kid. Listen, get strong, for I shall wait for you at the entrance to the necropolis. I will wait for you there, once you get strong, replied the rogue as he kept moving around the boy. Why are you helping me? Why would you help me? Asked the blonde. I know that you want to kill the Lich so that he cannot control the body of the deceased king. I know that you want to place the princess as the ruler of Stormwind and the Alliance and set things right, replied the rogue as he stopped moving and turned with his back at the undead and the blonde. Yes, I do want to do that, but why are you helping me? The blonde pressed on. Razor turned his head slightly towards the blonde and replied. Kel'Thuzad is my mortal enemy. I hate him with a passion. I want to see him die. I want to see him weak and helpless, he replied. But why? Asked Naruto, still pressing on for more answers. Why is not of your concern and will never be. I offer you my services. If you do not want to help, then I will do this myself. But if I fail, you cannot take him down by yourself. He is waiting for you, and he will know when you come. You no longer have the element of surprise, replied Razor, making the blonde narrow his eyes. Or you mean that? Yes, Razor said once more with a nod. He knows that you saw his spies, he knows that you know of him, he knows all, and is preparing to take you out before you get too strong, he replied. So what do you want me to do? Asked Naruto. Formulate a plan and get out of Undercity. He has agents there. Trust me, he said as he started to leave. But if he had agents, Sylvanus would surely have eliminated them by now, he replied as the rogue stopped moving. Sylvanus knows there is something amiss, yet she doesn't know what, he replied. Who in tarnation are you? Shouted Naruto, pointing a finger towards Razor. Are you some kind of god? What are you, because there is no way you could know all this, he shouted. The man slowly turned his head and looked at the blonde. The undead didn't know what the blonde saw, but he saw said blonde shiver when looking in the man's eyes. I am something you could never comprehend. Not now, at least. However, with the passing of time, you will learn who I am and what I am, he said as he stared, walking away. Get strong, but leave Undercity. It is a must, he said as he vanished from sight like a rogue would do. End flashback. As Sylvanus finished saying what she had to say, she looked at the blonde, waiting for an answer. He saw him sweating, knowing that he was now in a corner and that his plans have been spilled out. However, a grin appeared on his face, thinking that he still had a trump card in his sleeves. He could use it to make an alliance in dark times, like it always happened in the past. If you know that, then help me, he blonde said, making the two leaders' eyes widen at his demand. They were about to reply when the blonde came out of the shadows and looked at the blonde. They could see through his eyes that he knew what he was doing. They were no longer facing a child. They were facing a man that knew the hardships of the world, that knew the secrets of the world, that knew what was right and wrong. He knew it all. Me and Razor will indeed strike at the very core of the Lich's forces. However, I am not that confident as he is. I know that there is no way two of us can take him down, he said as he looked at the two leaders. And you want Use to help? Thrall said in a deep voice. Naruto nodded. You already know what I can do, but that is just the tip of it, he said with a feral grin and then turned serious. You have to understand something. Because Kel'Thuzad is still alive, the wheels of fate are spinning in a direction that could lead to the total destruction of the races, he said. Sylvana started laughing as she heard what the boy said. Yeah, right, and what would you know? I had talked with one of the Keepers of Time. I had been in the Caverns of Time, said the blonde, making the two leaders' eyes narrow once more. And what did he tell you? A bedtime story with fairies? Mocked the undead queen. She didn't believe him. No, said the blonde with a glare. He contacted me in my sleep and told me when exactly I will die, but once again he did not tell me how. All I can tell you is that somehow I will be taken directly to the Lich in front of him. That would be an opportune moment to strike. Where are you going with this? Asked Thrall, seeing that something is missing. As we speak, Razor is assembling the Alliance organization, the Shimmering Winds. The moment I disappear is the moment they will strike the Plague Lands, the moment they will strike Kel'Thuzad's fortress, replied the blonde seriously. You want us to team up with them? Asked Thrall angrily as he got the meaning of what the blonde was saying. Naruto glared at him. He knew that it could get him killed, but he knew that he wouldn't die here. Think of it! Forget about the past. Phinia can change the relation between Horde and Alliance. Don't you have a bigger enemy to face? Asked Naruto angrily. Isn't the Scourge a threat? Isn't Kel'Thuzad a bigger threat? Isn't the Burning Legion an even bigger threat? He almost shouted as he looked at the two stupefied leaders. What are you saying? Asked Sylvanus. You want me to kill Kel'Thuzad. Right now, I agree to what you want. From the start, I agreed because it was inevitable. But I cannot do it alone. For the first time in history, you can put all your differences aside and join forces, shouted Naruto as he looked at the two leaders. We can never do that, shouted Thrall back. They will betray us once more, he shouted. Then what about Theramore? What of those humans under Jaina Proudmoore? Asked Naruto, looking at Thrall, whose eyes widened. They respected the pact for so long that they still do not attack you. With Phinia and me, we can change the Alliance while you change the Horde, and we can live in peace. Naruto walked towards the two leaders and stopped right in front of them. Think of it, peace. After all those years of fighting for freedom, it can come now if we join forces and drive the bastard of a Lich back to his grave, he said as he looked at the two. Thrall looked at the undead queen and then back at the blonde. Sylvanus was already thinking about all of this. With the Lich dead, her people would finally be able to live without the Scourge threat from the Plague Lands. However, she doubted that the humans will agree to make peace with the Horde. Thrall knew that the elves will never make peace. Not after they started cutting down trees, which the elves considered one of their most prized possessions. However, the humans took from them their land, so they had to improvise. The barons had no trees from which he could produce weapons of war or anything like that, so he needed wood. It was inevitable that they would go for the elf land. Think of it, said Naruto once more. I place my life on the line that there will be peace. Assist me in the battle. Help me kill the Lich. I will free Stormwind and set a new order, along with Phinia. Sylvanus sighed as she bent down at the boy's level and looked at him in the eyes. I can't believe I am doing this, but, she said, closing her eyes and taking a deep breath, I will lend the Forsakens help and will wait for peace. However, if you betray us, we shall destroy the Alliance once and for all, she threatened. Naruto nodded and looked at Thrall. I will talk with the trolls and blood elves, as well as with the Tauren, he said as he turned to walk away. Sleep, child, for tomorrow we will train you. Naruto raised an eyebrow. Train me? He asked as he looked at the orc. You want to take down the Lich. You are still weak. We will train you to make you the ultimate weapon against him. So sleep, he said as he started walking away. Naruto closed his eyes and sighed. Just then he felt a finger trailing his cheek and his eyes snapped open. He found himself looking at the undead queen who was smirking. What now? Asked Naruto, looking at her. You amaze me, kid. You have just done something no one has ever had the guts to do. You stood before Thrall and myself and managed to convince us to peace. she said as she moved around the blonde in a seductive way. Where are you going with this? Asked Naruto, raising an eyebrow. It's quite simple. There is something else you know that you aren't telling us. But first, who are you? She said as she leaned on his back. Why do you want to know? Asked Naruto, not turning his head towards her. Because you are not from this world, I know it. And the power you hold, the attacks you make, you are no demon, yet you were not born in Azeroth or Outland, she replied as she moved her hands on his chest. Would you stop that? Asked the blonde, annoyed. Why would I do that? She asked with a grin. Naruto sighed. You will learn more about me later. However, when will I be able to leave this place? He asked as the woman pushed herself away from him. When we are done training you, and when we say so, she replied. Or you better not. We shall not hunt your woman, or women, she said with a devious smile on her face and making Naruto sigh in relief. However, should you fail us, we shall kill them. That was not part of the deal. Naruto growled as his head snapped in her direction. I am dead, boy. I have no heart, so I care not what happens, she said. However you want what is best for your people, you have a heart. I have the desire for the Forsaken to live the lives that were taken from them by the Scourge. Say what you want, I know what it is, the blonde said as the woman huffed and walked out of the chamber. Naruto sighed and then grinned. Everything was going according to plan, and how Razor had said it would happen. He never thought that it would this easy, but now the hard part will come, facing the Lich himself. And then taking back Stormwind and apologized to Phinia for him knowing the truth yet not telling her about it. The blonde walked to the bed and leaned down. He sighed and closed his eyes. Chapter 24. Towards Doom. -1 year later, 1 year had passed since Naruto was taken captive by the Horde. Even though he started as any other prisoner, after his little display of power, and after he shared some of his secrets with the leader of the Horde and the leader of the Undead, Naruto had found himself the next day as a guest of honor in Orgrimmar. Despite all that it was hard, the Horde did not accept him with open arms and right of the bat like in some sappy story. They sneered at him, glared at him, and growled at him. They ignored his presence and ignored him when he talked. Most of them did so. However, it wasn't Konoha. They did not attack him or do any physical damage. Naruto realized that due to the constant war, the Horde wasn't too kind to get along with the humans or any other alliance member. However, slowly the Horde members started to accept him and his presence. In 1 year, Naruto managed to snake his way in the hearts of the Horde. How he did it, not even he knew. But now, if he were to walk down the streets, they would smile at him. Some would stop and talk with him. Naruto liked the attention he was getting from everyone, and it also made him realize that he was the first human to be accepted by the Horde. He realized that now he would have to work hard to show the Alliance that the Horde is not what they think, and in the end to try and make the two sides reach an agreement and reach peace in the end. For 1 year, Naruto had been helped by the Horde in any way they could. It was part of an agreement he made with Thrall just a week after he became a guest of his. The flashback, Naruto was sitting in the massive library in the Horde leader's palace. He was holding an old book that had the history of Azeroth. The book gave detailed explanations from both Horde and Alliance side regarding the war between the two factions and at some point the war with the Scourge. Naruto was displeased with the Alliance's view. It seemed like in the past the humans were narrow-minded. It was actually strange that the book didn't say how the conflict between the Horde and the Alliance started in the first place. As he was reading, he became more and more displeased of the beliefs of the two factions. It was like back home. The villagers were the Alliance, and the Horde were the Jinchuriki, in a way said. The Alliance never stopped and listened, and that led for the other side to do the same. He had been reading the book for several days already, and it brought to light more about Azeroth. It also brought to light that someone had to change the views of the two major factions. Hello, Thrall, Naruto said as he raised his head up from the book. Behind his stood the figure of the Horde leader. I see you are reading our history book, not much of a history, he said, trailing off. The blonde shook his head as he looked down at the book. Actually, if there was someone that would open the humans' eyes, then all this would end. What do you mean? Asked the orc, raising an eyebrow. Just what I said. The blonde replied, glancing back at the Horde leader. The elves are at war with the Horde because of you, he said, making Thrall growl. The blonde looked back at the book and continued. You wanted war machines, those cost wood. You depleted the wood in Durotar, so you expanded your search area until you reached Elfland and started cutting down the trees, explained the blonde. We needed those machines to fight the humans and the undead, growled the orc leader back as he glared daggers at the blonde's back. Said blonde nodded. Indeed. However, don't you think that with some diplomacy you could have reached an agreement with the elves? Asked Naruto, raising an eyebrow. They would have attacked, replied the orc. And with that thought, the war started in the first place, replied Naruto with a sigh. What do you mean? The orc leader asked, raising an eyebrow in confusion. Let's take this example, shall we? Asked Naruto, standing up and turning towards Thrall. I am a human and you are your ancestor, one of the first that made contact with man, he said as Thrall nodded. Now put yourself in his shoes. This is the first time you ever saw a human. What would you do, or think? Thrall raised an eyebrow and looked at the blonde and responded. I would think that this creature is interesting, maybe a worthy opponent to fight with honor. However, this creature could have weapons on him and he could be unworthy. He might hurt me, and then my kin. The creature looks strange, he might be a savage. Naruto nodded at the explanation. This is what the human would think, he said, taking a deep breath. What is this creature? Green-colored? Vicious-looking. Will it attack me? Shall I attack it first? What if it attacks me? It looks like a savage. It might rip me apart if I do not act first, he said. Thrall growled, just like a human would think, he said as he spat the words out. Naruto shrugged and looked away. However, the question is, who would attack first? He asked, looking back at the leader. The human, replied Thrall. Really? Asked Naruto, raising an eyebrow. The majority of humans don't take rash decisions. They analyze before acting. Most of us are even uncertain at what to do when we see something we have never seen before. That does not explain anything, growled the leader. You sure? Asked Naruto. The human back then might have been too shocked to act. His mind might have been frozen in place. However, as you said, your ancestors thrived for the art of battle, always searching worthy opponent. What if he attacked first? The blonde asked. Thrall narrowed his eyes and growled at the blonde. He grabbed him by the throat and brought him up to face him. Do not place us at the same level as your kin, a bunch of scums, he growled. The blonde gasped for air. You know, let's not think that. However, he coughed for air. Why didn't the rest of your ancestors, apart from you, try to talk to them instead of fighting them? He asked between breaths. The Horde leader's eyes narrowed as he looked at the blonde and let him drop on the ground. Naruto coughed for air and looked back at him. The book even says it. You only fought. You never tried to communicate, so the humans fought back. It's in our nature to defend ourselves from what wishes us harm. Thrall looked at him with wide eyes before sighing. Maybe you are right, but... He narrowed his eyes and Naruto raised his hand up. No, I am not saying you are to blame for the war. I am saying that humans and orcs at the same time are to blame, he replied, making the Horde leader's eyes widen for a fraction. I mean, you never tried to talk to them, they never tried. You attacked, we defended, we attacked, you defended, and so on, replied the blonde. So, with the elves it was the same thing? Asked Thrall. Naruto nodded. You could have asked if they would give you trees, wood. Surely through diplomacy you could have managed it. He replied, however, I know that your decision to go in and take was because the humans were pushing towards Orgrimmar, and you needed to remove them from Kalimdor, the blonde said. Thrall nodded, closing his eyes. What about the dwarfs? He asked. Naruto shrugged. I am most certain that they were old friends of the humans, so you attack the humans, the dwarfs come to aid them, just like the trolls were to the orcs, and later on the Tauren here in Kalimdor. The leader sighed and nodded. So, back to the main topic. What did you actually mean by what you said? He asked. If there was someone more open-minded in the alliance, preferably the leader, then the war surely would end, he said. How are you sure about that? Because he would try to understand the other side, replied Naruto, looking back at the shelves with books. Like I am trying now, Thrall's eyes widened. What are you trying to say? The blonde smirked. As you know, me and the Princess of Stormwind are closer than friends. Heck, she even said she wanted us to get married. If that happens, you will become the new king, finished Thrall as Naruto nodded. And you want to end the war? If you ask me, this whole thing is stupid, the blonde replied with a bored look on his face. You both have a greater enemy, the Blood Orcs and the demons from Outland, he said with a shrug. Thrall sighed and nodded in contempt. You are right, but how are you planning to become the king? He asked. I will not lie to you. I love Phinia and I respect her wishes. I will try to open her views regarding the Horde and I cannot promise anything. However, my plan is to throw the Scarlet Crusade out of Stormwind, kill the corrupted and at least get in good terms with the Horde, he said with a sigh. You have a tough job, but I understand what you mean about the princess. You are quite the honourable person. I don't feel like that. I feel like I am plotting behind my beloved one's back, said the blonde, dropped on the ground in depression. The orc shrugged. She will understand, he said and took a deep breath. I will support you on this, he said, making the blonde look at him with wide eyes. Too many years of war, we want peace for once. We don't want to fall asleep and fear a blade at our throats. The same might be with the humans, I am sure, he said as Naruto nodded with a smile. And because of that and the fact that you will face Kel'Thuzad, me and Sylvanas discussed this, he said, taking a deep breath. You will be trained by the Horde, by a mage and a rogue. I will also train you with swords and in strength, and I will not lie. It will hurt, like hell, he said with a sadistic grin on his face, making Naruto pale. I think I got myself in deep shit, he thought. Glad I have popcorn, the fox replied with a snicker as he leaned in his cage to enjoy the training session through which the blonde will go. End flashback. The training was indeed a bitch, harsh with no mercy whatsoever. But in the end he became strong, very strong. He didn't imagine that he would be able to reach this level of power only after a year. True that he was trained to the bone, he was put to fight against many Horde warriors. Heck, he was even placed to fight with the first Horde warlock he had met. To say that Sadrin had fun torturing him wasn't new. The warlock kept him under fear spells and curses until his body and mind couldn't take it anymore and he just dropped on the ground, defeated. However, after 6 months of torture, the warlock approached the blonde and told him that he will help him counteract the warlock's fears, or at least try. However, Sadrin was rather sick in the mind, or at least that was what Naruto thought. The undead's training was harsher than Thrall's, more gruesome than his and more diabolical than QB's. Even the fox demon himself said that he was impressed. He was actually impressed. After 6 months of training, the Horde leader decided that Naruto should experience some outdoor combat as well. Under the careful watch of 30 of the most elite Horde members, Naruto was taken outside the walls of Orgrimmar and towards Ajara to fight against the creatures there. Some of them included the Naga that inhabited the beach area. Naruto had learned that he was under the watch of these many Horde, so as not to try and run away. He had promised to take down Kel'Thuzad, and Sylvanas insisted that someone was to watch over him and make sure he doesn't run off and never keep his promise. What they didn't know was that he never went back on his promises. They had learned that after a few months, though, and in time Naruto was let to travel outside Orgrimmar with only 5 guards. A rogue, a warrior, a priest, a shaman, and finally a warlock. The warlock was none other than Sadrin, who was keeping a close eye on him 24/7. Naruto thought that said warlock was after revenge after his stunt with Gamabunta. He never did actually find out why Sadrin always kept a close eye on him. The blonde helped the Horde by doing missions, and as such, however, he never did anything that made him go against the Alliance. At the same time, he was not allowed to see his girlfriends or even make contact with them. For an entire year, Naruto had been lost for Phinia and Seiya. The girls had never seen or heard from him, and he had never seen or heard from them. He was afraid what conclusion they might have reached. It frightened him to no end. The blonde sighed as he leaned with his back at a tree. Just a few days ago, Thrall sent an army towards the Plague Lands to wait for the Shimmering Winds, and then assist them in battle. He looked at the sky, thinking when the Lich will strike. He knows that at any moment he might jump at him. Just 2 months ago, he was contacted in his sleep by a Keeper of Time and warned him that in 2 months he will fight the Lich. Naruto had changed his wardrobe in the year that had passed. Right now, he was wearing the same armor Razor wore when he met him the second time. A skull-like mask with a hood over his head, gloves with a skull design on top of them. Black leather armor with chains attached to it and many pockets, black pants with chains as well and pockets. His shoulder armor had 3 spikes coming out and pointing away from the blonde's head. He even changed his sword. He now had a long blade that had the design of a dragon on the blade. The hilt was made out of leather, and the lower tip of the hilt had a small jewel. The upper part of the hilt had the design of a claw, and from it, the blade itself would start. The blonde raised his left hand and looked at it. He could barely see the faces of the girls now. He closed his eyes and his fist and sighed. Looking back at the sky, he narrowed his eyes as he thought he saw something flying in the sky. He shook his head, thinking it was his imagination. He looked back at the sky and narrowed his eyes. He placed his left hand on the ground and pushed himself away from the tree he was sitting under. A few seconds later, a massive dragon flew over it, ripping the ground and the tree. The blonde turned around and saw an ice-blue skeleton dragon flying in the sky. The dragon roared angrily as it spat out the ground and the tree. The blonde looked behind himself and saw a Death Knight standing there with his sword in his hands and looking at him. As Naruto was about to attack, he heard an explosion. He looked to his right and saw the auction house and the bank were on fire and that the Horde warriors were fighting the Scourge. A shadow passed over the blonde, making him look up. His eyes narrowed as he saw a necropolis flying above his head. Flashback. Naruto was sitting in the undead queen's room. She had called him to tell him something important from what he heard. The woman was currently lying in the bed and moving her body in an alluring way. The blonde was resisting her temptation, but it was hard nonetheless. The woman, seeing that he wasn't falling for her little game, decided to stand up and walk towards him. As she did so, she started speaking. "Tell me, boy, do you know how Kel'Thuzad likes to operate?" she asked as she placed her hand on the blonde's cheek and started moving around him, trailing his cheek with her hand. The blonde closed his eyes and shook his head. "No, I have never faced him before, and the books do not say," he replied. The woman replied, as she leaned on the blonde's back, pressing her body against his and making him blush slightly. "Then you should know this. He likes to mass his enemy," she said. "Mass his enemy?" asked the blonde, not understanding. The woman nodded as she moved closer to him until her mouth was near his ear. "Yes," she said in sensual voice. "The man loves to send a lot of his minions in the fight and overwhelm his enemies." "I see," the blonde replied with a shiver. "But how does he move his forces from one place to another? Surely an army of that size can be easily spotted and taken down from long range," he said. The woman chuckled slightly as she licked his earlobe, making the blonde shiver. "Yes, that's why he uses necropolises." "What are those?" asked the blonde, trying to pry himself from her grasp. The woman frowned, seeing that he was resisting her, and let go of the blonde. "Structures that can be teleported from one place to another. He used them before to assault the capital cities of both Alliance and Horde. So, be careful," she said, walking away and swaying her hips, trying to allure the blonde to her. End flashback. "Well, I should have expected this," the blonde said, looking up at the large necropolis. His eyes narrowed for a second as he ducked under a sword. He turned around and jumped over another swing. "Akerm, QB, can you deal with him?" he mentally asked the fox as he looked at the Death Knight. "No," came the short reply, making the blind raise an eyebrow in confusion as he ducked under another swing. "Why the fuck not?" he asked, slightly pissed off. He had never heard the fox saying no when it comes to battles, so why now? "I have no idea what that lich did, but a year ago, when I fought that Death Knight, he was draining my power," the mighty fox growled angrily. "He was stealing my power." He roared inside the cage as Naruto could hear the fox hitting the cage bars with his paws. "What do you mean, he was draining your power? Like a warlock would drain life force to replenish his?" the blonde asked as he drew his old dagger and blocked the enemy's sword. "Worse than that, he was draining my power. How I do not know, and he was assimilating it," the fox replied as the blonde ducked under the sword and stabbed the knight in the shoulder. "Assimilating?" He was in confusion. "It means that the motherfucker was using my own power against me," QB growled in annoyance. "Like I said, I don't know how the lich did it, but if this guy can drain my power as well, then he could drain enough until he can par with me." "Well, that fucks up my plan," the blonde said as his eyebrows were twitching in annoyance. The blonde saw the sword coming again. With a swift motion, he unsheathed his own sword, blocking the knight's weapon. He kicked the knight in the chest, making him take several steps back. The blonde then raised his sword and lowered it on top of the knight, only to get blocked by the enemy's sword. Naruto smirked and vanished from sight, startling the enemy. The Death Knight looked around frantically, trying to sense the blonde or figure out where he was. However, he realized, much to his anger, that his enemy was at a whole new level now. He turned his head around, thinking he felt something. He turned around, and it was then that he felt something stab him in the back. He felt great pain. He then felt someone jump over him. He looked up, and his face connected with the blonde's sword, cutting his head in half. As the knight dropped on the ground in a pool of blood, Naruto turned around only to come face to face with 3 more Death Knights. He sighed in annoyance, knowing he will have to take care of them as well. The blonde charged forward towards his enemies. As they raised their swords, ready to intercept, the blonde jumped in the air and vanished from sight, startling the knights. All of a sudden, one of them screamed, and 2 heads turned in the direction of the one that screamed. They saw him on his knees holding his side. It seemed like he had been hit in the kidney. The knight in the middle heard his companion moving around. He turned towards his companion and saw him moving from left and right like a drunken idiot. He realized that the blonde must have sapped him while they were distracted. Suddenly, he spun around and blocked the blonde's dagger that was aimed at his kidney. He raised his foot and kicked the blonde in the chin, making him fly away. As the blonde touched the ground and jumped back on his feet and dashed towards his enemy with great speed. The Death Knight was surprised by the speed, but he was not taken off guard. He blocked the blonde's sword and ducked under the dagger. The blonde jumped behind the knight, and his sword and dagger started glowing purple. He attacked again, and the knight raised his sword, blocking the blonde's. However, the dagger managed to hit him, making the knight kick the blonde in the stomach, forcing him to take a few steps back. Not waiting for the blonde to make a move, the knight raised his sword and lowered it towards the blonde. Naruto, who was still in daze, raised his dagger to block the sword, only to have it broken. The blonde watched with wide eyes as his dagger was cut in 2, and the sword was now on his shoulder. As the Death Knight took the sword out of his shoulder slowly and painfully, the blonde yelled out in pain, and he jumped away, clutching his injury. He growled in anger as he let the broken dagger fall on the ground. He stood up and grabbed his sword with both hands and looked around. He saw the other 2 Death Knights now standing up and looking towards him. Naruto grit his teeth from the pain and turned towards the knight he had hit in the kidney. The blonde concentrated on the sword. As he got closer to the enemy, the Death Knights realized that the sword was in flames. Naruto started moving his sword to the side more and more, and when he got close enough to the Death Knight, he vanished, only to reappear behind the Death Knight, bent forward with the sword to the side. The 2 Death Knights watched in amazement as their companion's upper half, from the chest upwards, suddenly dropped from the rest of the body as blood started spraying from the lower half that dropped a few milliseconds later. The blonde grinned behind his mask. "Say hello to my improved sinister strike," the blonde thought as he started chuckling darkly. Naruto slowly stood up and turned towards the remaining 2 Death Knights. He saw the one that broke his dagger making a sign to his companion to attack. Surely that guy was the leader. The blonde saw the second Death Knight charge forward with his sword to the side. Naruto raised his own weapon and blocked the weapon. He moved back and blocked another slash. He kept doing as such for a few seconds until he blocked the enemy's sword again and grabbed him by the head. The blonde spun behind his enemy and took his sword. He lowered the blunt side on the Death Knight's leg, shattering the bones from the powerful impact. Naruto watched with fascination as the leg twisted in an unnatural way and the knight fell to the ground. He saw as he was trying to get back on his feet using the sword as support. He even saw the leader moving towards him. The blonde grinned as he jumped away just in time, avoiding the leader's sword. However, the injured Death Knight was not that lucky, as his own leader chopped his head in half, killing him instantly. The blonde thought he heard the leader grumble. He saw him take the sword out of his companion's skull and kick the dead body away. He turned towards Naruto and unsheathed a dagger. He then spun the 2 weapons in his hands and took a stance familiar to rogues, one that Naruto recognized. The blonde was shocked when the Death Knight vanished from sight and appeared in front of him with both weapons above his head. The blonde used a quick substitution and replaced himself with a nearby body. The weapon stabbed the body and the knight growled in anger. He shoved the dead body away and turned towards the blonde in a slow manner like all Death Knights do. The blonde raised his sword above his head and bent down in a defensive position. Once again, the Death Knight vanished from sight and appeared in front of Naruto with his weapons ready to strike. Naruto blocked the sword and moved out of the dagger's way. He spun behind the knight and moved his sword to strike. It was blocked by the leader's dagger. Said leader then spun around fast with his sword. The blonde ducked, avoiding the sword that was about to decapitate him. Naruto jumped away and looked at his enemy once more. He never thought that these guys could be rogues or as fast like this. The blonde shook his head and analysed the situation once more. He was facing a rogue. He could use his mage spells, but whenever he would fight a rogue with mage spells, he would lose. He brought his hands together and flashed through hand signs. A dragon made out of earth shot from the ground. It roared to the skies and turned towards the knight. It charged forward with its mouth open. The knight jumped out of the way as the dragon flew past him. He looked behind and saw the dragon had already turned, and it was charging towards him once more. He looked towards the blonde and saw he was standing in the same spot with his hands in one seal, maintaining the dragon. The knight charged forwards, while he kept glancing behind and dodging the dragon whenever it got too close. As the leader got closer to the blonde, he moved his weapons to the side, ready to strike. As he reached the blonde, he moved his weapons to cut him in two. The blonde grinned as he jumped over the attack and over the Death Knight. "You lose," the blonde said just before the dragon rammed itself in the Death Knight, sending him flying in Orgrimmar's walls. As the blonde landed, he disappeared in a swirl of leaves and reappeared behind the knight that was trying to stand up. "Goodbye," the blonde stated darkly as he cut the knight's head off. The body fell to the ground as a pool of blood started to appear. The blonde looked at the dagger that the knight used. It was a short black weapon. The hilt had two spike-like things at the start of the blade, and the blade itself, black as well, was sharp and looked deadly. Nice dagger, I think I will take it," the blonde said with a satisfied grin as he bent down and grabbed the dagger. He watched with fascination as a purple glow appeared on the blade, writing a name. "Harbinger of Doom. Nice name," the blonde thought with a grin as he sheathed his new dagger. The blonde's head snapped up as he heard something soaring through the air. He bent backwards and raised his hand, grabbing an arrow. He slowly turned his head and saw an army of skeleton approaching. There were several archers amongst them and some summoners. The blonde sheathed his weapon and ran towards the army. The skeletons looked at each other and then back at the blonde. They charged as well with their weapons raised. As the blonde got closer, he concentrated on his right hand, and a blue aura appeared around it. He jumped in the middle of the army and raised his hand in the air. "Frost Nova!" he shouted as the aura intensified and covered the blonde's aura. Ice then shot from the ground around the blonde in a circle. It moved under the army, and ice shot from the ground, encasing the entire army in ice. The blonde looked around with a satisfied grin as the large army was struggling to break the ice. The blonde concentrated again and raised his hand to the sky once more. "Blizzard," he stated, as large shards of ice started falling from the sky on top of the enemy. The blonde watched with satisfaction as the ice shards would fall on top of a skeleton, completely shattering it, or as a shard would pass through it, destroying the body or ripping the head of. Naruto felt the ground shake. He lowered his hand and looked around. He saw the summoners were doing something. He watched as hands shot from the ground and started pulling their bodies out. The blonde could see zombies rising all around him from the ground. He sighed. He didn't want to deal with this right now. The blonde moved his left hand to the side and concentrated. His hand caught fire and he slammed his palm on the ground. "Blast wave!" he shouted as a wave of fire shot from around him. The zombies caught fire and the fire started burning them. The blonde saw them drop like flies, one by one, completely burned. He concentrated once more and moved his hand in front of him towards a group of advancing zombies. "Flame strike," he said as he raised his hand up in the air, and a pillar of fire shot from under the zombies, incinerating them. The blonde finally turned towards a summoner and moved his open palm towards him. "Arcane missiles," he said as strange purple missiles shot from his palm towards the summoner, each hit making him take a step back and making a hole in his body. The last one hit the summoner in the head, making it fly away, and the summoner drop on the ground, dead. The blonde turned towards three more and raised his palm up to the sky once more. Ice started forming in his hand. He then closed his hand in a fist and slightly lowered his arm. He then took a step back and threw a spear made out of ice towards one of the summoners. The spear hit him and exploded inside the summoner, sending his flesh and bones in the air. "Let's see if my jutsu is ready for combat," the blonde said to himself as he started doing hand seals. For the past 2 months he had been trying to create his own unique jutsu. Like the Yondaima had the Rasengan and the Hiraishin. He wanted something powerful as well, something that will make him known, even if it wasn't in the elemental countries, at least make him known in Azeroth. As the blonde finished his hand signs, he slapped his hands together. Fiery demons no jutsu? He shouted as 9 flames shot from the ground around him, taking the shape of various creatures. Each one of them turned into a strange animal. Some of them were standing on 2 legs like humans, others had more arms. One of them, however, had 9 tails. The fire resembled a flaming fox with 9 tails. It was taller than the other summons. The blonde smirked behind his mask. "Enjoy the feast," he said in a dark tone as the summons charged forward. The fox lunged at one of the remaining 2 summoners and started ripping him to shreds. A wolf-like creature and dog-like creature joined the fox in ripping the summoner, while the remaining 6 flame summons charged the second summoner. Said summoner raised his staff and raised a wall of bones only to be shattered by a large axe. He could see a minotaur was wielding it. Said minotaur roared and raised its axe. It then lowered it on top of the summoner. The summoner raised his staff in an attempt to block the attack. However, the fire burned right through the weapon and crashed in the summoner's skull. The blonde watched with fascination as his jutsu finished the job. He grinned with satisfaction at the turn of events. A year ago he would lose against this army. Now he had them in his palm. He could crush them without a second thought or without breaking a sweat. Not even the Death Knights were a match to him now. The blonde saw everything turning dark around him and he raised an eyebrow. He looked up and his eyes widened when he saw the necropolis flying above his head. Before he could realize what was happening, he felt himself lifted from the ground. He looked down and saw his feet weren't on the ground anymore. He looked around trying to see who was making him float, but there was no one apart from the dead bodies and his fiery summons. The blonde tried to find a way to get back on the ground. He suddenly started shivering. He looked behind and saw the dragon from before behind him blowing ice on him. He narrowed his eyes and looked at his body. It was encased in ice. He started wondering if the thing about fate was right, if everything that happened now was because of fate. He saw the dragon fly away, and it was then that he realized that he was getting closer and closer to the necropolis. About halfway there, he stopped ascending. He looked around as strange circles appeared around him. He watched as everything around him turned green and then vanish. However, as the light vanished, he realized he wasn't in Orgrimmar anymore. He was somewhere else. He looked around and saw dozens of skeletons and ghouls. He saw death knights and summoners. He even saw several liches. The blonde realized that he could be inside the necropolis. He concentrated on his left hand and fire appeared around it. The fire started melting the ice around his hand, and when he could feel that he could move his hand, he spotted the fire. He made several hand signs fast and replaced himself with a death knight. The entire army turned towards the blonde. They all raised their weapons. The liches prepared their spells and the summoners as well. "God, I hate uneven odds," the blonde said to himself. He was about to charge when he felt a powerful presence behind him. He looked behind and his eyes narrowed when he saw Kel'Thuzad himself. "Welcome to my domain," the lich said as Naruto narrowed his eyes behind his mask. "Welcome to Naxxramas," he said as the army charged towards the blonde. Razor stood in a tree watching the horde forces and the shimmering winds fighting. Well, not fighting with weapons and magic, but fighting with words. The topic was none other than Naruto. Just a month ago, the Shimmering Winds got word that Naruto was in the hands of the Horde. It was when they were told to come to Naxxramas. They would have declined if the messenger hadn't said that Naruto requests their presence. They came expecting to see him, especially his girlfriends. However, they came face to face with the Horde. "What have you done to him?" growled Zagak angrily as he held Sadrin by his collar. Said Warlock glared back at him. "I have done nothing, you foolish elf. Take your hands of me before you purify my cloth." He spat back at the druid. "Listen here, scum. If you don't give the boy back, I might have to chop you into tiny little pieces," Tirasves said sadistically as she held a mage prisoner with her dagger as his throat. "Stupid rogue, what makes you think I have him?" The mage growled back in annoyance. "I say we just beat the crap out of them and then raid Orgrimmar and find the brat," Sillin said as a blue aura appeared around him. Razor narrowed his eyes when he saw that everyone was unsheathing their weapons and preparing their spells. Deciding that things have gotten too far, he jumped down from the tree and right in the middle of the two factions, startling them. He slowly stood up and looked around, his eyes glowing blue for a second behind his mask. "Stop it this instant. This is not the reason you are here," he said to both sides. Who? Celine stuttered for a second before composing himself. "Who the fuck are you?" he asked, pointing a finger to the man. The rogue turned towards Celine. "Razor is my name, killing is my game," he said with a smirk behind his mask. "Wait," Zagark said, looking at the rogue. "You're the same one from Stormwind. After I met you, then I have been doing some research on you. I remembered that there was a boy that Kadal saved. He took the name of Razor. However," Demile continued, "I know for certain that Razor died about 3 or 4 years ago in a raid against the Molten Core." "How do you know that?" demanded Razor. They could hear in his tone that he was a bit frightened. "Because I was with Razor in the raid," Celine said, approaching the man. "Razor was killed, stabbed by a pike in the back," he said as he stopped in front of Razor. "He died in front of me while I was trying to heal him." "Who are you?" asked Zagark. "And what have you done with Naruto?" he asked, taking his mace out. "Zagark, what do you mean by that?" asked Finia. She was wearing a white priest robe that had 3 green stripes going down from the neck to the bottom. She had a pearl-like necklace around her neck, the same staff that Naruto had given to her a year ago. Her cowl was pulled down. "Because he sent the message, he delivered it. He knows something," he growled. Razor straightened himself and glared towards the druid. "If you think I am holding the boy captive, you got another thing coming," he said angrily. "Then where is he?" demanded Saya. He had a silver helmet on her head. Her face could be seen as there was nothing protecting it. She wore a black shirt, and on top of that was a chainmail armor, plated shoulder pads that covered and protected her shoulders fully, and mail pants. She was holding the bow Naruto had given her, and Seven was standing right beside her. "He is here," he said, moving his hand towards Naxxramas. The girls gasped. "You mean he's inside?" Finia asked, startled, as the man nodded. "Why?" asked Saya. "How?" "Why?" asked Razor, looking at her. "Because I told him that we will raid the place and kill Kel'Thuzad." It was then that a white light hit him, making him take a few steps back in shock. He looked towards the priestess that was glaring at him. "How could you?" she demanded angrily. "You sent him in there alone!" "I did no such thing," the rogue shouted back. "He was taken by the Scourge just a few hours ago when they raided Orgrimmar." As he said that, the organization saw the Horde members tense. "I knew I should have stayed and helped," Sadrin said as he looked towards the large structure. "You knew?" Zagark asked, looking towards the rogue. "Did you know that they will go after Naruto?" The rogue nodded. "He was left as bait so we can strike." Zagark clenched his fist as he moved towards the man and punched him in the face, making him fall on the back. It was clear that he wasn't putting any fight. The druid grabbed the rogue by the collar and raised him up to his face. He then slammed him in a nearby tree, and the Horde forces moved their hands to their weapons once more. "Bait!" shouted the druid. "You left him as bait!" he roared in anger. "It was his desire," the rogue shouted back. "He said that he will give us the chance to strike, to take the Lich by surprise. He said his army is weak after the fight with the Horde army. They were all expecting them, even hoping to defeat them and not let the boy be taken captive. But not everything goes as planned." The druid growled in annoyance. "You are not Razor. The real Razor wouldn't do what you did." He said, "Who?" The druid started as he moved his hand to his mask. "Are you?" he shouted as he grabbed the mask and pulled it off. His eyes widened as he let go of the rogue that dropped on the ground with his face down. Zagark took a few steps back in shock and looked at the rogue. "What's wrong?" asked Finia. "Do you know him?" she asked, looking back at the rogue. "It can't be. You can't be in 2 places at once," the druid shouted. "Yes, he can't be," the rogue replied as he started getting up. He slowly raised his head and looked at the ground, whose eyes widened in shock. The girls looked in shock at the rogue, tears appearing in their eyes. "Naruto?" the girls asked, looking at the blonde man with blue eyes. "No," he said calmly as he looked at 2. "Name's Minato, Namikaze Minato." Chapter 25. The Thin Line I Walk. Naruto stood panting on the ground. He stood in a pool of his own blood. His hair was all messy and filled with blood. His head was hurting, and he was bleeding from everywhere. He couldn't even hear the fox anymore. He could barely hear his own breath. He couldn't see straight anymore. As he looked at his hands, he could only see an unclear image of them. He killed as many as he could. He took down dozens of skeletons, dozens of zombies, and many death knights. But he couldn't go on anymore. His hands were trembling. He looked at his right arm. It was encased in a block of ice. He was cold. He wondered, was this the end for him? Was it his destiny to die by the hands of an undead maniac? He tiredly raised his head and looked at the lich before him. He had no expression. He was dead, but he could see he was smirking in victory. Naruto looked down again. His sword was broken in half, the dagger was stabbed in his chest, all was lost. He slowly stood up, his legs shaking like crazy. He used the wall near him as support as he raised his head and looked at the lich, trying to defy him one last time, trying to not give in his sick pleasures, to let him know that even though he had been defeated, his soul will not accept it. You do not need to worry, all will end. Your soul will serve me after this, the lich said as if reading the blonde's mind. The young rouge's head dropped as he realized he would be serving unwillingly this malicious thing. When he had fought, he had killed spirits that were controlled by the lich. He killed elves, dwarfs, humans. He killed the spirits of them all, were it child or elder. He killed them. He couldn't stand it anymore. It hurt him inside knowing he killed them. Why? Asked the blonde as he fell on his knees. I desire power, more and more power. I desire it for my own pleasures. The world shall live in darkness as my army shall rise. The lich shouted as the walls trembled. You'll get nothing, the blonde said in a raspy voice as he fell flat on his face and succumbed into darkness. The two parties stood in shock as they watched the blonde man stand up. He analysed everyone before him until his eyes stopped on the druid. His eyes narrowed angrily. He did not want his identity to be revealed. He was ordered for no one to see his true self. He was Razor in this world. Minato was dead and forever dead. He never existed in this world. The blonde man closed his eyes and sighed. I guess I failed, he said sadly as he looked at his hands. What do you mean? Asked Phinia as she looked at the blonde man before her that resembled her lover so much, apart from the lack of whiskers, of course. Said blonde man looked up at her and smiled sadly. I've failed the deal. He is not going to be pleased. He sighed again as he looked down. I guess my soul will stay locked inside him for all eternity now. The two parties looked at each other in confusion, wondering what this strange man was talking about. It was clear to them now that he was obeying someone's orders, but the question was who. It was clear he wasn't obeying Kel'Thuzad since he was trying to kill that lich, but still. Who was he obeying? Your soul, asked Seiya curiously as she approached the man. What happened to you? She asked. Minato sighed as he looked up and gave a sad smile. I died 16 years ago. My soul trapped, never to be free again. Wait, said Phinia, as she approached him and looked in his eyes. Where are you from? Are you from our world? She asked. Why do you ask that, princess? Sillin inquired as he looked at the girl. I have my reasons, was the answer he got before the girl asked the same question again towards the blonde man. Minato smiled sadly at her once more as he answered. Naruto is lucky to have someone like you, he said before looking at Seiya. And you as well. The girls looked at each other again and then at the man who dropped on his knees and waiting. It was like he was waiting for his so-called master to come and take him, to come and take his soul as he put it. I just wish I could have seen him face to face, without that razor charade, he said sadly as sat down on the ground defeated. The deal was off the moment they saw his face and he told them his name. He lost. Minato tensed as he felt a hand on his shoulder. He looked behind thinking it was him, but it was not. There was no one behind him. He looked in front of him and saw it was Phinia that placed her hand on his shoulder. She was looking in his eyes. She wasn't glaring at him. He could see the confusion in her eyes. Please tell me from where your soul is, the girl gently asked once more. Konoha, he said with a small smile as the girl's eyes and the druid's widened in surprise. I lost my soul when I defeated Kyubi, he said once more as he lowered his head and the girls gasped. You mean that you're... Yo... Seiya looked at Phinia that was also trying to remember that title. Yondame? Asked Phinia after a moment of thought and the man nodded silently. That means you're the one that sealed Kyuubi inside Naruto. He once more nodded, and before the girl could speak again, he started talking. It was at that moment that I lost my soul, forever, he said as his head dropped more. But what does that mean? Asked Seiya. Or what about your master? Who is he and what did he want? Asked Phineas. Minato looked at the two and smiled. I will tell you if you promise me one thing, he said. He knew that his time had ended and he wouldn't be able to see Naruto, but at least he could send a message with the girls in front of him. The girls looked at each other before nodding. Minato smiled. I want you to tell Naruto I'm sorry, he said with a weak smile as the girls smiled as well and nodded. The blonde man opened his mouth to talk once more before he tensed and his eyes widened in fright. No, it couldn't be, he shouted as he stood up and looked towards the necropolis. The two sides tensed and looked towards the large structure. Was there something coming out? Did Kel'Thuzad realize that they are here? Was he sending an army towards them? Questions ran through their head until there heard the blonde shout, Naruto! And saw him running towards the structure, drawing his weapons out. It was at that moment that they realized something bad must have happened. They also realized that he might be luring them into a trap. However, they all started running towards the necropolis to find out what was happening. As they entered, they saw the blonde man slashing all the undead that were blocking his path. No matter how many stabs he received, he continued to fight. The two parties looked at each other and nodded as they both charged forward to help Minato. Naruto tiredly opened his eyes. He looked around him. He was in some kind of cage. It was large enough for him to sit up straight. He was now lying on the cold floor. He couldn't move. He could feel his power leaving him. He could feel his eyes closing. The blonde looked around. Machines were everywhere, tubes with green liquid. An abomination banged the cage's bars as it roared at him. He just looked at it, tiredly. He had no more will to say anything, to shout in fear or to move his body as a reaction to the creature. He could smell the stench coming from it, rotting flesh, yet he could not move his arms and pluck his nose. He felt too tired. Leave him be, a cold voice said as Naruto identified. It belonged to the blasted lich, the one that defeated him no matter how hard he fought. He will die any moment. You will get no response from him anymore. The creature growled as if it was trying to say something. You may devour his flesh after I finish what I am doing with him, the lich said as the abomination started walking away. Naruto could feel the ground shaking with each step the creature took. He looked towards the lich that was working on some machine, the person that defeated him. He used 4 tails of Kyuubi's chakra, and yet the blasted lich could not be defeated. He had called that skeleton dragon or whatever it was. The blonde saw some ghouls approaching the lich and giving him some items. He saw a skeleton taking some blood out of him and handing a bottle full of his blood to Kel'Thuzad. The blonde blinked as he felt something stab him. He felt his energy leaving him even faster now. The lich was doing something to kill him faster. He closed his eyes and went into his subconscious. He didn't want to die alone. He wanted someone to be there and see him, to wish him farewell. The fox was the only person that was close to him at this moment and could do such a thing. As Naruto walked the halls of his mindscape, he could see the sewer draining. He could see the pipes rotting. When he reached the cage, he could see those pair of eyes looking at him. They were looking with remorse. The blonde smiled as he collapsed on the ground in front of the cage and smiled. End of the road, for me, the blonde said with a small voice and a weak chuckle. And me, he's trying to take me away from your body, the fox said as he winced. The draining process seemed to be painful for the fox as well, but he was trying his best to hide it. Naruto watched in fascination as the fox was slowly starting to disappear. Kyuubi, please, stay here until I go. I want someone to wish me farewell, the blonde said as he looked at the massive demon. Said demon smiled for the first time and lowered its head towards the blonde. He could see the pain in his eyes, both from the extraction and from the fact that he would witness his death. Don't worry, I'll be here till the end, he said with a smile. Huh! Naruto tried to laugh, but it only came out as a weak sound. You know, I never thought it would end like this, he said once more as his voice became more and more weaker. I always thought I would see you on your deathbed along with those 2 girls, the fox said with a chuckle as he flinched once more. Same here, he said as his eyes started tearing. I wish I could see them one last time. I miss them, the blonde said as tears were leaking down from his eyes. The fox looked down on him with sympathy. "Kit, I won't be the only one saying farewell," the fox said as the blonde looked at him. Naruto watched as red chakra moved out from behind the bars and stopped in front of him. The chakra started morphing until it turned into Phineas and Seiya. They looked how they looked the last time both of them saw them. They walked over to Naruto and kneeled down next to him and took his hand. Naruto could see them shedding tears for him. It was the fox crying through them. He smiled weakly. "Thanks, Kyubi," he said as he felt their hands on his cheeks. It felt so real. "It's the best I can do. At least I didn't ruin your entire life," the fox replied with a bow of the head. "I'm glad you attacked Konoha. If you hadn't, all this would have never happened." Naruto replied weakly as he looked towards the bars and towards the seal. "I just wish I wasn't an ass for so long. I could have helped you more." The fox chuckled while wincing once more. Naruto saw him fading more and more. He saw the girls were fading as well. He looked towards the seal and with his last powers he stood up and started walking towards the bars. "Kyubi," he said as he stopped in front of the seal. The fox's eyes widened as he saw what he was trying to do. "No! If you do that, you will damn your soul in between the world for all eternity," he shouted. He knew that if the Jinchuriki removes the seal during an extraction process, then the soul would forever be lost, never to go to hell or heaven, but it would never roam the land of the living. It would be lost. "Could care less," said the blonde. "Do me a favor. Rip Kel'Thuzad to pieces for me," he said as he grabbed the slip of paper and started pulling. "Don't!" Kyubi shouted once more. He could feel his power coming back towards him with every moment the piece of paper was being pulled and he could see the blonde vanish more and more. And tell Phineas and Seiya that I'm sorry I won't be with them, nor in life, heaven or hell," he said with a weak smile as he tore the seal despite the fox's protests. "Goodbye, Kyubi," Naruto said as he vanished from sight. Kyubi watched as the mindscape crumbled and then a bright flash blinded him. As he opened his eyes, he scanned the area around him. He looked down at his hands. He looked behind himself. He still had his tails, all 9. He looked around until his eyes stopped on one person. He saw the blonde's lifeless body. He looked around once more and he saw he was in the cage the blonde was put in. "Who are you?" a voice demanded. Kyubi turned around and saw the lich behind him. His eyes narrowed as he started growling dangerously. Kel'Thuzad looked shocked at the man. Or creature before him. He looked like a man in his mid-20s with flaming red hair, a very build body, red slitted eyes, 9 foxtails and a pair of fox ears, whiskers on each cheek. He was wearing some strange armor, or clothing he had not seen ever. The lich did not know, but Kyubi was wearing black Anbu-style pants, a bloody red shirt with a spiral on its back, and a long katana on his back that had the blade made out of flames. Kel'Thuzad watched in awe and shock as red energy shot from the man and destroyed the cage. He was now standing in front of him and walking slowly towards him. He did not know why, but his presence started scaring him. "Servants, kill him!" he shouted as the undead charged forward. Kyubi looked towards the advancing army and moved his hands to the side. Flames appeared in his palms. He slammed his hands on the ground and then everything started shaking. A few seconds later, pillars of fire shot from the ground, hitting each advancing undead and frying them, leaving nothing but black dust behind. The fox turned his attention towards the lich as he started walking slowly and dangerously towards him. "You motherfucker!" he growled as fire started swirling around him. "For the first time in thousands of years, I had started liking a human and you come, ripping said human soul, shattering his dreams and life." He spat as he vanished and appeared in front of the lich, delivering a powerful punch, making the lich fly away and hit the wall. "He was a friend, one of the only I have, human or demon. It did not matter," he roared as the fire started encasing him. "Ever since my curse I had been shunned, even the demons despised me. And yet I found a friend in the blonde, and you kill him." He shouted as the ground around him started melting and fire started erupting around him. "I will most definitely avenge him." Kyubi shouted one last time as the fire completely consumed him and became more and more bigger. Kel'Thuzad watched in fear now as the fire formed a gigantic fox with 9 tails. "You will find out why mortals and demons alike fear me," Kyubi shouted as he charged towards the lich, grabbing him by the head with his mouth and shaking him around until finally releasing him and throwing him in his own machines. It was at that moment that a large group entered the doors and watched the fox in fear as it was just standing there in the middle of the room and growling. Phineas and Seiya noticed the tails and started fearing that Naruto had transformed into a demon fox. Minato, however, knew what it meant. He dropped on his knees as tears started appearing in his eyes. Come out and let me rip you!" Kyuubi shouted once more as he jumped on the machines, making them explode. He moved one of his tails and grabbed the lich, raising him in the air. The newcomers watched in morbid fascination as the fox was slamming the lich on the ground, then throwing him in the air and in the walls. "Time you become human again," the fox roared as he slammed the helpless lich on the wall, and all 9 tails entered his body and his chakra started pumping in the lich. "No, my power!" the lich shouted, as his yells started becoming more and more human. In a matter of seconds, the lich stood there no more. Instead, there was a necromancer, a combination between a human and an undead. It was the old Kel'Thuzad before he acquired the powers of a lich, when he was still serving under Arthas. Kyuubi threw the necromancer away and the fires appeared once more. They started becoming smaller and smaller until, instead of the gigantic fox, stood a man. He had 9 tails, fox ears and whiskers. "I will enjoy beating the crap out of you, mortal," Kyuubi shouted as he vanished from sight only to appear in front of the man. The fox delivered a punch in the man's chest, making him fly in the wall. The fox took a deep breath and bent towards the necromancer. He opened his mouth as flames started pouring out and moving towards the necromancer. As he saw the attack coming towards him, Kel'Thuzad raised his hands and formed an ice shield to block the attack. He watched with fear as his defense was melting and the fire raced towards him once more. Everyone could then hear his screams as the flames reached him and started burning his dead flesh. Kyuubi stopped his attack and moved towards the necromancer. A large plum of smoke covered the area. He entered the smoke, and everyone watched as the body of the necromancer was thrown out of it. The body rolled on the floor several times before stopping. Kyuubi then appeared above the necromancer and delivered a powerful punch in his skull, making the floor shatter under the pressure, as well as the necromancer's skull. He then grabbed the body and lifted it up. He raised his knee and dropped the body with force on the knee, ripping it in half like it was some piece of wood. Satisfied with his work, the fox threw the remains away as he roared towards the sky, his roar echoing through the entire chamber. He then lowered his head and let out a long sigh. He slumped down on his knees and stood there looking towards nothing. His eyes were not focused anymore. He wasn't paying attention to anything anymore. The group suddenly heard someone whimpering. They looked around and saw Minato on his knees crying while looking in one location. Following his line of sight, their eyes landed on the body of Naruto. The girls gasped as they ran towards the body. They ran past the fox, who didn't even move. He just stood there, lost in his own sorrow. As the girls reached the body, then dropped on their knees. Phineas placed her hands on the boy's shoulders and gently shook him. "Naruto?" she asked, as tears leaked out of her eyes. "Naruto, wake up," Seiya said, choking on her tears as took a hold of one of his hands and held tight. "Please don't leave us," she said silently as she raised the hand to her face and started crying. "No," sobbed Phineas. "You promised we'll be together forever," she cried as she lowered her head and started crying on his chest. Minato walked behind the two and looked at the fallen boy's body. It was full of scars and burns. He lowered his head in shame. Somehow he felt that he was to blame. If only he had stayed in Orgrimmar and worked with him, maybe he wouldn't have been the one to die right now. The blonde man collapsed on the ground on his knees as he started trembling. The girls turned to him and saw a look of horror on his face. The man turned his head slowly behind, and his eyes widened. "Shinigami-sama," he whispered. The girls heard him and looked around the room. They couldn't see this Shinigami he was calling. "Well, Minato, time's up, deal's off," the now identified Shinigami said as he approached the blonde. Minato lowered his head. "I know, worked so hard even all is lost," he said as his voice became more and more shallow. "Don't worry, eternity won't last forever. You may never know when Kami-sama decides to change some things," the Shinigami said as he stopped behind the blonde. "Could I ask at least something?" the blonde inquired as he looked at the Shinigami. He was oblivious to the fact that everyone, apart from Kyuubi, was looking at him strangely. They could only see him talking to himself. They thought he had lost his mind. "Depends on what you require," replied the Shinigami as he lowered himself at Minato's level. "Is Naruto all right?" he asked with hope. He hoped that he was at least on his way to heaven, and he would live with his mother. The Shinigami shook his head regretfully. He is neither in hell or heaven. He does not roam the land of the living. He is stuck in a void, replied the mighty being. What does that mean? Stuttered the Yondaima in fear. He had ripped the seal during the extraction process. Thus he sealed his fate to forever be lost to the world, either dead or alive, said Shinigami. You see, Jinchuriki have a major setback. When the demon is extracted, they die and their soul goes to hell or heaven, depending on what they did. However, there was a deep pause here that made Minato gulp. If during the extraction the Jinchuriki rips the seal and frees the demon, he sends himself to be lost from the world, never to come back. I don't understand, said Minato, shaking as tears started appearing in his eyes again. What Shinigami-sama said is that during the extraction process, the Jinchuriki's soul is being slowly taken away by Shinigami himself. If the seal was ripped, then the surge of power from the captive demon would make the Shinigami unable to grab the soul. Having nothing to take it away, the soul drifts away from the world into the void. He falls into the plains of despair, replied Kyuubi as he stood up and walked towards Minato. What is the plains of despair? Asked Zagak as he also approached the group. The plains of despair is what its name says. They are a place where the soul's darkest fears come to fruition. The soul suffers for all eternity and never gets any rest, replied the mighty fox as he lowered his head. It's like hell, only that if you get there, you will never come out, he said. Minato looked down at the ground in sorrow as he felt the Shinigami placing his hand on his shoulder. I guess back to the dark abyss for me, he said unemotionally as the Shinigami nodded. Wait, Kyuubi said, making the Shinigami stop. The fox dropped on his knees and bowed down towards the collector of souls. Shinigami-sama, I beg of you to release the boy from his captivity. I know that you can travel to the plains of despair. While that is true, I am not allowed to remove the souls. Only Kami-sama can do that. I only walk down the plains and witness the tortures, was the reply the fox got. But if we get Kami-sama to take his soul, if we can convince her, the fox tried to say, only to be stopped by the Shinigami. She already has a soft spot for him. She would gladly accept to take him out of there. He then raised his hand as Kyuubi was about to interrupt. However, we are not in the elemental countries. Here rules play in another way. His fate was set in stone, and the only way to change that is to convince the Keepers of Time. You mean we need to talk to Zaladormu? The fox asked and grimaced when the great Shinigami nodded. There was a long silence then. No one said anything, and no one did anything. The only sound that could be heard was the silent cries of the two girls, and from time to time the deep sighs of the deceased Hokage. Let's do it, said Minato as he stood up and looked towards Kyuubi. Let's talk to him and ask for his assistance. The fox looked at him with wide eyes and then down at the ground in deep thought. He closed his eyes and smirked as he also stood up and crossed his arms in front of him. All right, he said with a grin as he walked towards the blonde boy's body. Kyuubi gently picked up the body and walked towards Minato. The man placed his hand on the demon's shoulder and nodded. Wait, Phinia called before they could disappear. Oh, where are you going? She asked. Go and wait in Darnassus, said Kyuubi with a smile. If we succeed, then just wait there, he said as he and Minato vanished in a swirl of flames. Seconds later, the Shinigami vanished as well. No, said the mighty dragon, as he looked towards the blonde man and the red-haired demon that was currently pinned down by the Keepers of Time. Why not? Demanded Kyuubi as he growled and tried to break free. When they got to the Caverns of Time, they appeared right in front of Zaladormu. All was well and nice, until he placed his request and was rejected. The fox lost his temper after arguing a little, and his movements seemed to incline that he would attack. The result was 10 Keepers of Time holding him down. Everything is set in stone and will never change. Returning life to a person would destroy the balance of the world and eventually destroy the world itself, said the aged dragon as his glare bore through the fox that didn't even seem affected. Can't you just forget about that stupid rule for once? The world will not end with him, Kyuubi shouted as a Keeper of Time pressed his hand harder on his skull. Demon Lord, you do not belong to this world. Return to your world, said the dragon as he turned his head away. The boy does not belong to this world as well, Shinigami said as he appeared behind Minato once more, sending shivers down the man's spine. We, however, are the ones that set everything in stone. When it is said that someone will die, they die, Zaladormu replied in a calm voice. Yes, but while that is true, the boy falls under my jurisdiction, and if Kami-sama decides to let him free— No, said the dragon once more, interrupting the god of death. Even if she told me to free him, I would not do it, he said sternly, and then looked down towards the blonde man that was holding the boy's body. I am sorry it happened like this. He was a great person, but you must understand that his fate was set in stone. There is no changing that. Minato was about to reply when Shinigami cut him off. Then what about Madara, he inquired as the dragon looked at him with narrowed eyes. He might be of our world, but he denied the rules. He is alive, and you know that, the god said as he threw his barging chip. While that is true, there still is someone that will kill him eventually, and when that happens, his soul will forever burn in the pits of hell, replied the aged dragon sternly. Zalador Musama, said Kyubi. The dragon turned towards him and his eyes widened when he saw the 10 Keepers of Time on the ground unconscious. He saw the fox on one of his knees with his fist on the ground and his head lowered. I swear I shall fulfill all your duties. I shall kill whoever you desire. I shall become an assassin in the name of the Keepers of Time and kill those that destroy the balance of the world, if you allow us to free the boy. Zaladormu was about to decline the offer when someone else spoke up. I believe that is an interesting proposition, said Anachronos as he stepped out of the shadows. The large dragon bowed towards his superior. Anachronos, what do you mean by that? Asked the aged dragon. There still is the threat of the Burning Legion, a favor for a favor. Wouldn't you agree? He asked with a smile as he nodded towards the fox. They already defeated the Scourge. They can stop the destruction of the world by stopping the Legion. Would they not? He asked once more. The aged dragon closed his eyes to think. A few minutes later he opened his eyes and nodded. Very well, Anachronos, you will help them free him. It seems that his fate will be rewritten, he said as he closed his eyes and fell asleep. Anachronos bowed and turned towards the ground. Follow me, he said as a portal opened behind him and he stepped inside. 2 weeks had passed since Naruto died. Phineas and Seiya stood in Darnassus at the priestess palace in one of her many rooms. They had waited for 2 weeks, but neither Kyubi nor Minato returned with the body. They started wondering what they were doing and where they were. Even now they still cried after their loss. They would barely leave their rooms and they rarely spoke to anyone. Phineas sat at nights wondering what will happen now. She couldn't rule Stormwind alone because the laws dictate so. She couldn't take her home place back and she couldn't battle the Scarlet Crusade on her own. But that didn't matter to her that much. What mattered the most was that she now had no one. She was alone. Naruto was everything to her, and losing him for her meant that she had lost her life. Even Seiya couldn't sleep at nights. She regretted all the moments she could have spent with the boy, and yet she didn't. She wanted to go back in time and stop all the bad things that had ever happened. She wanted to be close to him and feel his touch once more. It ached her at night knowing that the person she loved so much died and now would never come back. Right now, we find the 2 girls in Phineas' room, sitting on the bed and trying to keep each other company so they could feel better. They barely talked. They just enjoyed each other's presence. It was then that a bright light appeared in their room and a woman's voice could be heard. Step into the light, they need your help, the woman said as a strange light started moving in the room above them. Who are you? Stuttered Phineas in shock. The woman giggled in response. You gave me many names, but I am God, or Kami for Naruto, she said sweetly as the girl's eyes widened. What are you doing here? Asked Seiya in shock and awe. To get you two. You see they found a way to bring him back, but it is tougher than they had expected. What do you mean? Asked Seiya once more. You see, you can't just pull a soul out from the plains once he entered it, because he already experienced a lifetime of his worst fears. Pulling him out will pull him with the imagination that what happened in the plains is real and he would be nothing but a mindless zombie if you want me to put it that way, Kami replied. How can we help? Asked Phineas as she jumped on her feet, her heart already racing at a fast pace. The woman giggled as the strange light disappeared and a new one appeared on front of the girls. Step into the light, she said before her voice vanished. The girls looked at each other and nodded before jumping into the portal. Why? Why does this have to happen to me? Why does everyone hate me? I don't understand it. A small, blonde child could be seen walking through the streets of Konoha. Everyone was glaring at him and curing his name. Someone would throw rocks at him, and he would fall down and injure himself. They would laugh at him and point at him. No one would help him up. What did I do? Always beaten, always hated. Was I born to be hated? Why do you hate me? The boy continued to walk until he reached his apartment. He saw it was burning down and the villagers were changing and cheering. He looked around and saw that it was a ninja burning down his house. He looked down, saddened by what he was seeing, and he tried to hold back his tears. I am not welcome here. I am not welcome anywhere. All they want me to do is die and rot away. I am nothing. The boy looked up as a hand was placed on his shoulder. He saw an aged man with white robes and a white hat. The boy smiled as he recognized him. His smile vanished as man's face turned into rage and his kind eyes were replaced with cold and deadly ones. He started beating him and torturing him. Why, Oji-san? Why do you hate me? Why do you beat me? I did nothing wrong. I thought you loved me. Why betray me? Everyone was laughing as a small boy stood in the middle of the training field. He was full with scars and no one gave a damn. They all looked and pointed at him while laughing. They called him names and threw things towards him. He saw everyone he loved hitting him and calling him names. No friends. I have no one. I am but a lone person, sir. I am nothing. I am no one. A man, a ninja. He had a scar on his nose. He smiled at the boy as he helped him get up. The blonde smiled back happily that someone was helping him. However, the man's smile vanished as the boy was thrown to the ground thanks to the man in question. Said man started laughing as he told everyone that they should practice their shuriken and kunai aiming on him. Iruka-sensei, I thought you loved me. You betray me like everyone. Why? You said you loved me like your own brother. Why betray me? More and more people he saw his teammates throwing him away at the enemy, leaving him to fend for himself. He saw his sensei beating him and calling him a demon. He saw the villagers. They were all saying that demon spawns like him have no family. He murdered his parents and laughed as he did so. It's not true. I don't know my parents. I didn't kill them. Kasan, Tusan, where are you? Save me! An old lady, blonde hair, she smiled at him as she gave him money. Her smile turned into a smirk as she took the money away and laughed. She placed the Hokage's hat on her head and spat on him. She made a motion with her hand and more people came. More ninja, they took him away. He was thrown away. In jail. Ba-chan, no, this is not true. Ba-chan wouldn't do this. Why? Why is this happening to me? A pair of red slitted eyes looked down at him as a deep and evil laughter echoed around him. A large nine-tailed fox appeared as it grabbed him and started ripping him to shreds, despite his cries for help. Despite his begs for mercy, the fox would continue and devour him. It would laugh as it kept doing what it was doing. Kyubi, you said I was a friend. Why are you killing me? Why did you trick me? I thought you cherished me as a friend. A silver-haired girl was standing on a throne, an arrogant smirk on her face as a man with a crown was standing next to her. He could not see his face and he could not see his expression. He did not know who he was, but he knew who she was. He could hear her telling someone to dispose of the demon, to kill him and end his life. Finya, you said you loved me. Why? Why did you betray me? You told me you want us to get married. Why did you go away with someone else? He felt a cold steel on his back. He turned around. A cayenne-haired huntress stood there with a triumphant smirk as she lowered her pike through his heart. She laughed as she stabbed him in the neck with his own knife. She started laughing as he was choking on air as he was struggling to breathe. Why? Seiya, I loved you. I love you. Why are you killing me? Why are you calling me a demon? Why? He could see the two girls he loved laughing at him as they were saying that demons don't need any love, don't need any family. They laughed as he cried and laughed more as he tried to plead for his life. Everyone hates me. They all lied to me. It was fake. Who am I? I am no one, demon. I am a demon. I have no love, no friends, no family, all alone. It's so cold. Please, stop the pain. I don't want it anymore. Someone. Anyone. Stop the pain. Why do you hate me? Seiya, Finya, why? Why do you hate me so? Naruto, we don't hate you, someone said as he felt himself enveloped in a warm hug. He saw the girl's image vanishing. He could see them vanishing until all he could see in front of him was a vast desert filled with nothing. He heard sobbing. He turned his head around and saw silver and cyan. Why am I tortured? What did I do? Am I evil? Am I a demon? Who am I? You're Naruto, the silver-haired person said as she raised her head and looked into his eyes. You're the boy I love. Love? What is love? No one. I have no love. Demons aren't loved. Demons, I am nothing. No, shouted the second person as she also lifted her head. You are our light. You are the person we cherish so much in this world. Alone, I am alone. No family, no friends. I'm here, a male voice said as a hand was placed on his shoulder. A red-haired man stood next to him with a warm smile. I am your friend, and you have more. They are waiting for you. Not real, all is fake, doomed, I am doomed. There is nothing for me. I am lost, forever, lost. Tucson, son, where are you? Please, save me. Shh, it's all right, someone said as another hand was placed on his shoulder. Tucson is here, the person said as he wiped the blonde's face gently with his hand. Tucson, who am I? What am I? Who are you? Who are you all? You're Naruto, Namikaze Uzumaki Naruto, my son, the greatest person in the world, human, replied the man. Son, human? I am a human. Who are you? I am your father, Namikaze Minato, and I am here for you, Ian. It's time we leave this place. Everyone is waiting for you. False, not true. They don't love me, my love, my huntress and my priestess. They hate me. No, it's not true, the silver-haired girl said. I love you. That was not real. I would never betray you. It's all an illusion, please. Please come back to us. Yes, I don't want to live without you. What? The Cayenne girl said as well. The world is nothing without you by my side. Please, come back. Back home. I want home. I want to be loved. I don't want to be abandoned. No more pain. I want the pain to end. The boy looked in front of him. The image of everyone he knew appeared before him, all calling him back, all smiling at him and nodding at him. Oji-san, Iruka-sensei, Kakashi-sensei, Ba-chan, Ero-senin, everyone. The boy closed his eyes as a smile appeared on his face. He could feel himself being pulled away. He felt warm, he felt safe, he felt loved. The warmness, he wanted to live, he wanted to be loved. Time to go, young one. As the clock ticks, everything you do will be written. Until the moment you pass away, you are the one to write your path. Time to go. It's time for you to wake up and enjoy life, a voice said in his head as he smiled. Wake up, he said as he vanished from the desert, never to be seen again. Ugh. He slowly opened his eyes as he looked at the ceiling. Was it all a dream? Did he really die? Was everything that he had seen and experienced real? Naruto looked at the ceiling. It was a nice green color that seemed too peaceful looking at it. He looked around. He was in some kind of bed. It was big, fit for a king. The room was decorated with a lot of items. All seemed so expensive. All of them seemed to belong to royalty. He tried to move only to feel something holding him down. Then he heard someone mumble his name. He looked down and saw two girls, each on one side, sleeping peacefully near him and holding him tight in an embrace. He recognized them, his huntress and priestess. He leaned back in the bed and brought them closer to him. They moved their heads on his chest and a smile appeared on their faces. The blonde closed his eyes, succumbing to sleep. It was real. He was truly loved. What he had seen, it was fake. Chapter 26. All ends well. A red-haired man stood in the middle of a clearing observing two elves as they trained. The elves didn't seem to care that they were observed. They knew he was there. A lightsaber moved towards the red-haired man and sat down next to him. The man placed his hand on the large cat's head and started petting it, drawing purrs from it. I see the animals like you, said the blonde man as he stepped into the clearing. The druids stopped their training and bowed slightly towards the blonde. The blonde returned to bow to them and smiled. Animals always liked me, at least to a certain extent, said the redhead as he looked at the cat and smiled. The cat yawned before closing its eyes and drifting to sleep from what it seemed. So tell me, O great Yondame, what is it you require of me? He asked with a foxy grin. Minato shook his head as he sat down next to the man. Nothing really, just wanted to talk, he replied as he looked at the pond in front of them. The redhead sighed as he turned towards the blonde. Well then, speak up, he said. I remembered seeing a symbol on you. Even now you carry it, Minato stated as he pointed towards the redhead's shirt. That spiral is from the Uzumaki clan. How come you carry it? He asked out of curiosity. The man looked down in shame. I rather not talk about it. Brings back painful memories, he replied as he threw a rock in the pond. It can't be that bad, can it? The blonde Hokage asked. Once more Kyuubi sighed, he stood up and walked towards the pond and kneeled in front of it. He moved his hand over the water and stared at his reflection before answering. A thought long ago before hidden villages were even created, when clans still lived in wars with each other, I was alive. He replied as an image of his home appeared in the pond. Minato stood up and walked towards the fox and looked down at the pond. He could see a small village with people. They all had the Uzumaki clan symbol. Flags with the symbol were everywhere. The houses were small with just one floor, all decorated nicely with all kind of vegetation. When I was young, I had a desire. I strived to knowledge. I wanted to know more and more. No matter how many books I read, no matter how many scrolls I studied, I still wanted to know. He continued as the image changed, showing a small boy with black hair sitting in a clearing with a book in his hands. What were you seeking? Asked the Yondaime. I wanted to know what was before us. Surely there was something before the existence of chakra. I wanted to know what happened to the old world, and I wanted to know what was beyond the veil. He replied as the image once again morphed, showing the elemental countries, only that it showed some kind of shield that seemed to teleport anything that tried to pass them back inside within the shield. Minato was stunned by what he was seeing. He had never heard of a veil, or that there was something outside the elemental countries. Come to think of it, he never was interested if there was anything before chakra. He never asked himself that question, and he never really cared. He was happy with all that he knew, and he didn't want anything to change. However, it also made me an outcast. I kept locking myself away from the world to study. People started thinking I would go insane. He sighed as he looked at the pond. There were also times when I would sneak into the clan head's house. He continued as the image changed, showing the boy from before sneaking in the middle of the night in a large house. I always believed that the leader would have some secret scrolls that would tell me more, and I always tried to find them. But I always got caught. He kept telling me to stop it or I will be punished. I never listened. And it was my demise. The image changed, showing the young boy walking through the dark corridors of the house. I never thought it would happen that way. He said, "Damn, old man," the little boy said as he kept walking. "I know you are hiding something here. It has to be here somewhere." Just then he heard a strange sound from the room across the corridor. Curious, like any other kids his age, he walked towards the door and slowly opened it. Suddenly someone ran towards him and crashed in him, throwing him and the person to the ground. Ugh! The boy groaned as he rubbed his head and looked up to see a small girl, no older than 10 from what it seemed. The girl looked up in fright and then blinked in surprise. "Kyushi-kun?" she asked as the boy's eyes narrowed and the girl felt pain travel through her body. "Masao!" he shouted as a masked man looked up at him and withdrew the kunai from the girl's back. Without any hesitation, he jumped away, disappearing into the shadows. The black-haired boy crawled towards the girl and picked her up in his arms. "Masao, are you all right?" he asked, panicked. What was he supposed to do? He was only 10. He didn't know any healing techniques. Just then, he heard a gasp. With fear in his eyes, he turned around and gasped in fright. That day, I doomed myself. They didn't find the weapon or the attacker. While it is true that Masao had lived, she had been in a coma for a year. The leader deemed me as an accomplice, but due to his kind soul, he didn't execute me. However, he banished me from the village. The image morphed, showing the young boy as he left the village with tears in his eyes, not even looking back. "I swear I will find out who did it. I will clean my name," he shouted towards the sky as he ran into the nearby forest. From that day, my goals changed. No longer did I wish to know all. I wanted revenge and power. I trained myself in the forest for 8 years and scoured the lands for answers until I found out who did it. Kyuubi said, "Apparently it was an opposing clan. Those bastards hated the Uzumaki with a passion. I don't know why and I never found out." The image once again morphed, showing a teen standing at the entrance of a village. He had a katana in his left hand and he was dressed in black clothing, his face hidden behind a hood. "It was that day I sent my soul to hell," the fox said as the image morphed and showed the teen slaughtering people left and right, fighting the ninja that were desperately trying to defend those weaker. The image changed once more, showing the teen killing young and old with no remorse. It made Minato shudder when he saw the teen killing like a demon. I didn't care if it was a newborn or an elder. I killed them all, and I enjoyed it, the fox demon said with a disgusted look on his face. At the end, I wiped them all. I cleaned the area and destroyed the clan. Sure, some survived and ran away, but they were later killed, hunted by other clans. I scoured the village in search of answers and found an old order of assassination, my ticket to clear my name. The image showed the teen as he walked into his old village, his katana sheathed and all the blood washed away. He could see the people looking at him strangely and whispering amongst themselves. Some looked at him in fear and parents took their children away from him while men were tense and some were reaching for their weapons as if they knew he would attack at any moment. Once more, the image changed, showing a very old man sitting at a desk. Behind him stood a girl with long blue hair and matching blue eyes. She was looking down in shame from what it seemed. The teen stood in front of the desk, shaking. Minato couldn't realize if it was from anger of something else. News of a demon that massacred an entire clan spread like wildfire. They described me perfectly, and when I reached the village, even thought I showed them the letter, they still didn't want me back. What? Shouted the teen in outrage as he lifted his head, and cold blue eyes could be seen under the hood. You heard me. While I accept the proof and will clean your name, we will not accept you back amongst us, the old man said sternly as the girl looked down at her feet. And why the fuck not? Demanded the teen as his hands started twitching, signaling that he was losing control over himself. How can we accept someone that kills like you? Shouted the old man in return, making the teen take a step back in fright. You killed little children, newborns. He shouted, that is not how an Uzumaki acts. You are no longer one of ours. Now get lost. I realized that what he said was the truth. We Uzumakis lived by a rule. Protect those precious to you, and do not harm the defenseless and innocent. Kyubi recited as he punched the water and then moved his hand away in anger. I disobeyed that one rule, and it cost me everything. What about that girl? Asked Minato curiously. Kyubi moved his hand over the pond once more, and the image changed, showing the teen as he was stomping out of the village, only for the girl from before to appear to his side and grab his arm. He turned towards her, ready to kill her. His hand stopped a few centimeters from her neck as he looked into her eyes. I don't know why I stopped, why I let her live, Kyubi said as it showed the girl tell him something. I don't remember what she told me. I can't remember her voice and the words she told me. All I remember is that my heart became lighter and I felt happy. I remember that in the end I left the village with a smile on my face. But how come you became a demon? Asked Minato as the image faded away and he was now staring at his own reflection. I walked a path I should have not, he replied. Keep in mind, those that seek power and eternal knowledge will eventually destroy themselves. That's what I did, he said as he moved his hand over the pond once more, showing a man in his 30s looking deathly pale. He was in a small cabin looking over some scrolls. That was the year when a plague erupted in the countries. It killed many. I came in contact with it and was dying slowly and painfully, he said as it showed the man coughing blood. However, I did not want to die, so I cheated death, he said. Minato saw as the man sneaked into a village and stole several children. In my delusion I did horrible things, said the Kyubi, as it showed the man performing a strange ritual on the children. It showed as the children's bodies suddenly started aging rapidly until it turned to dust and the man becoming more and more healthy. Not only did I anger the Shinigami for what I did, but I angered Kami for killing innocents for my own desire to live. You see, there is a saying, when Shinigami comes for your soul, no matter how hard you try, you may never escape him. I tried to escape him and it landed me in hell. However, all the deeds I have done when I was alive, it turned me into a demon. At first I was just a lesser one that would work around the clock torturing souls. That was my punishment. I turned myself into a demon, Kyubi explained as he sighed. Strangely, the Fox Lord at that time saw something in me and took me away from my normal work. He gave me the Fox clan power, giving me a tail and fox ears. He instructed me and sent me out into hell to grow stronger. And I did. I still strived for power, more and more power. It didn't take long for me to gain 9 tails, he said as he showed an image of himself standing over a pile of corpses with a sinister grin on his face. The Fox Lord saw my desire for power and didn't seem pleased, so he sent me to the living world, for what reason I didn't know at that time, he said with a shrug. However, I realized that if I was back, I could go and decimate the Uzumaki clan for banishing me. But, in the end, my human side got the best of me. The image changed, showing Kyubi walking through the forest and towards his village. He stopped at the end of the forest and grinned wickedly as he looked at his former home. He jumped on top of a house and hid himself, wanting to take them by surprise. Kyubi said as the image showed his past self looking at her with soft eyes. I remembered her, Kyubi said as the image showed his past self looking at her with soft eyes. His eyes landed on her finger where a golden ring was. He looked at the children and saw their traits were similar to the woman. I don't know why, but I felt that if I harmed the village, I would harm her. I suddenly didn't want to kill. Minato looked at the fox strangely as Kyubi chuckled and looked back at him. Most demons enjoy killing. I enjoyed slaughtering everyone. But after following the woman for an entire day, I couldn't bring myself to kill anymore. So I decided to become the Uzumaki clan guardian. Guardian? Asked Minato curiously. Kyubi nodded. Yes, I stayed on Earth from that point on, looking over the clan and protecting them in secret. Then how come they were destroyed later on? The blonde man asked. It happened during my hibernation. It was during winter. During that time my animal instincts kept kicking in and I was weak to control them. I fell asleep, to put it bluntly, Kyubi said with a nervous chuckle as the blonde Hokage's sweat dropped and looked at him curiously, wondering what kind of demon he was now. Also, that is how the Biju came to be, he said as Minato looked up curiously. Each Biju did something horrible in his life that upset Kami. We are a reminder that humans are not allowed to interfere in the god realm, he explained as he sat down on the ground and kept looking at the pond. Suddenly, Kyubi stood up and turned around. I need some alone time, he said as he started walking away, making Minato look back at the pond and frown. He smiled as he passed his hand through her silver hair once more. He could feel their breaths on his neck. It was pleasant, and he enjoyed it very much. He didn't manage to get much sleep. He had no idea why, but Naruto enjoyed just sitting in the bed and feeling the warmth coming from his two girlfriends. He sighed happily as he felt Seiya snuggle closer to him. He rubbed her back, gently making the girl moan in her sleep. Naruto closed his eyes and smiled. There was nothing that could ruin this anymore. He didn't know for sure, but something inside him told him that Kel'Thuzad was dead. He realized that since he couldn't find the cage and Kyubi in his mindscape anymore. He dreamed that he had died. Now he knew for sure that he did. He wondered how come he was alive now. He knew for a fact that all this was real. It couldn't be false. Whatever the cause, he didn't pay too much attention to it. He just enjoyed the fact that he was alive. He opened his eyes as he felt someone appearing in the room. He looked down at his feet and saw a red-haired man sitting in a chair at the end of the bed, grinning towards him. Said man had red slitted eyes and red hair. Somehow Naruto recognized him. His eyes widened for a second as he remembered dreaming about a red-haired man saying that he was his friend. His eyes stopped on the man's cheeks, on his whiskers. He then looked up and saw the fox-like ears poking out of his head. Kyubi, Naruto said with a smile towards the demon. Seed Demon grinned further at the blonde. Nice to have you back among the living kit, he said in a low voice. Naruto realized that he might not want the girls to wake up. Maybe he wanted to talk in private or something. What do I owe this pleasure? Asked the blonde, continuing to smile as he kept stroking Phineas' hair and rubbing Seiya's back. The fox shrugged as he looked towards the blonde. Just wanted to see how you are. You've been out for 3 days. He paused for a second as he took a deep breath. And dead for 2 weeks, he said, making Naruto stop what he was doing. 2 weeks? He asked as he shivered involuntarily. So I experienced all those nightmares for 2 weeks? He asked once more. Kyubi nodded in response. Pretty much, he said with a weak smile. You know, everyone was worried for you. He then chuckled. Even the Horde. It was quite shocking to see the savage orcs worried about a mere human, or the undead. He gave a weak smile of his own and nodded towards the Demon Lord. I guess I won a lot of people's trust. And you don't know half of it, replied Kyubi with pride. He could actually see the red-haired man's eyes shine with pride towards his former container. But enough about that. How are you feeling? He asked with concern. Well, I feel a bit empty, replied Naruto with some hesitation. I feel insecure, he continued while looking at the ceiling. I mean, I always had you to keep me alive, even if it was for your own desires. You always did keep me alive. That is true, but you don't have to worry about those things, the fox said with a grin. While you were out, I did some minor adjustments to your body. Naruto raised an eyebrow at the demon lord. What adjustments? He asked. You didn't by chance turn me into a half-demon? Goodness gracious, no, though that isn't a half-bad idea. He chuckled at the boy. What I did was improve your senses, made you more agile and gave you my healing factor. Your lifespan is still the same, like it was before when you had me sealed inside of you. He took a small pause, letting a smile appear on his face. And you would be happy to know that Phinia was granted the same lifespan as yours. You mean it? Naruto asked, almost jumping out of the bed in happiness. The fox nodded as he crossed his arms and leaned in the chair. That's great, he exclaimed before slapping his hands over his mouth. He looked down and saw the two girls starting to stir. He looked back where Kyuubi should be and found only an empty chair. He wondered how the fox disappeared like that, without sensing him or anything. He felt a hand on his chest. He looked down and smiled as he looked at Phinia's face. She was looking back at him with a happy smile. Before he knew it, the girl brought her hands up to his neck and pulled herself up towards him, placing her lips on his. The two shared a long, passionate kiss before pulling apart. He looked at her and brought a hand up to her face, placing it on her cheek. She smiled as she closed her eyes, feeling the touch of her lover. We missed you, she said in a tiny voice. He could feel the pain he had caused with his death. I can see that. He whispered in her ear as he kissed her lightly on the nose, making her giggle. Don't forget about me, Seiya said with a pout as she looked towards the blonde. He chuckled as he shared a kiss with her as well. It was good to be alive. He looked at the girls and raised an eyebrow as he realized that they were staring at him. Something wrong? He asked. Phinia moved her hand to his face and rubbed his cheek. Your whisker marks, they're gone, she said, looking a bit sad. But you have to admit that he looks even better now, Seiya replied, with a grin that was immediately matched by the princess. Guess it's a side effect of not having Kyuubi in me anymore, the blonde said to himself as he rubbed his cheek. He was surprised that he had indeed lost his whisker marks. He looked up and saw the girls looking down at him with lust in their eyes. Somehow it unnerved him, and it made him wonder why they were looking at him like that. But then again, a lot of things unnerved him. He pushed himself up a little and looked at the two girls in the eyes. He opened his mouth to speak, only to have Seiya place a finger on his mouth, telling him to be quiet. So what do you think, Phinia? The cayenne-haired huntress asked. The girl in question put a finger on her lips and smiled. I believe that we should do it, she said with a giggle. Do what? Asked Naruto curiously. Well, Naruto, after what happened a few weeks ago, with your passing, said Phinia, we decided to give ourselves to you, she said with a smile as she moved her hands on the blonde's chest. Give yourselves to me, asked Naruto, not really understanding. After all, it wasn't his fault that he wasn't properly taught about these kind of things. Lemon scene removed. 2 days passed since Naruto's experience. The girls couldn't move from normally for an entire day after that, so Naruto was supposed to look after them. He didn't really mind. He liked spending time with the girls he loved. He loved all the time he shared with them. He learned even more about them during that time. After those 2 days, the trio walked out of the mansion they were living. It was the same mansion Tyrande herself lived. She wanted the blonde to stay there while he was in Darnassus, so she made a special room, fit for a king, only for him and his 2 lovers. We now find Naruto and the girls sitting in a small clearing and enjoying the gentle breeze of the wind. Naruto was sitting under a large tree and looking up at the sky while Seiya was playing with Seven. Phinia had a book in her arms as she sat down close to Naruto. Just then, 2 people entered the clearing and everyone turned to look at them. Naruto's eyes widened as he saw the Yondaime walking next to Kyuubi. The man in question raised his hand up, telling the teen to keep quiet, seeing as Naruto was about to jump up and started asking a million questions. Naruto, the Yondaime said as he stopped in front of him. He looked at the blonde seriously, said blonde looked at Kyuubi and saw that he was serious as well. I need to tell you something, you and your girlfriends, he said as he saw the 2 girls looking at him. All right, I think, Naruto replied, as he scratched the back of his head, not knowing what exactly to do. Minato sighed as he looked at his son. He felt Kyuubi place a hand on his shoulder and nodded. First of all, you 2, he said, looking at the girls. Asked me who my master was. He told them as they nodded. My master is the god of death, Shinigami. This little revelation earned shocked looks from the 3 teens. What do you mean the Shinigami is your master, Yondaima-sama? Asked Naruto with a stunned expression. What I mean is that after my soul was taken, the Shinigami came with an offer. He told me that if I ran some errands for him in a different dimension, I would be granted 2 things, he replied as he looked at the blonde. The first thing I would have been granted was to be able to leave his stomach and go to heaven and reunite with my wife. He told them as the girls looked at him with smile and imagined the image of the Yondaime meeting with his lover. Phineas sighed happily at her image, making the Yondaime chuckle silently. He never understood girls. Not completely, at least. What was the second thing? Asked Naruto, bringing everyone back to reality. Before I tell you that, let me tell you what my errand was. Shinigami made a deal with the Keepers of Time. What deal, I don't know. All I know is that I was assigned to kill Kel Thuzad, he told them as their eyes widened. But then, why didn't you kill him before me or Kyuubi? Asked Naruto, not understanding. I mean, stories tell how you decimated armies with a single hit and using the Hirai Shin. Minato nodded at the blonde. Yes, it is true. But I couldn't do it. What do you mean? The Hokage asked as he titled his head to the side. The Shinigami stood in front of him in all his glory. He looked down at the small man, right into his eyes, making him flinch. You are dead. Chakra is the essence of life. While I will somewhat bring you back to life, you are still technically dead. The only ability you will have is the one of the body you shall inherit. You mean you will just shove my soul into a dead body and make me kill that lich? Asked the Yondaime with a disgusted look. From all he could know, the Shinigami might shove him into a skeleton body and let him work like that. He shuddered thinking that. In a way, yes, replied the Shinigami. However, the looks of the body will change after you take over it. It will be yours. It will be you, he told the legendary Cage. So all I have to do is kill that person and you will let me see my son and then let me be with my wife? He asked. The Shinigami nodded as he looked at the man. There is just one rule you need to obey, which is no one. Absolutely no one must know who you really are and where you come from. No one is to see your real face. He told him as the man's eyes widened. But then, how do I hide myself? He asked, getting afraid he didn't want to ruin this one in a lifetime. Or death time chance. In the world I will send you, you will find ways. Humans are cunning creatures after all. The great god of death stated as Minato disappeared from his stomach. The group, minus Kyuubi, looked stunned at what they just heard. But then, how come you are still here? Seiya asked. While it is true that I broke the rule, the mission was accomplished. However, the Shinigami decided to keep me here for some time. He told me that I would need to accomplish one more task before I could go to heaven, he said with a smile. But what was the second thing? Phineas asked this time as she tilted her head to the side. It was to meet my son, he said with a sad smile as everyone looked at him curiously. At that, Naruto's eyes widened as a flash of the Yondaime appeared before him, a flash in which the man told him that he was there, that his father was there by his side and will keep him safe. Gulping, the blonde looked up and with a shaky voice he asked, Dad? Minato smiled as he looked at the young blonde. Yes, son, he inquired as the teen looked down at the ground before jumping in his father's arms, crying happily. Come on, Kyuubi said to the girls as they looked at him. Let's leave them for now. And with that, he turned and started walking away. The girls looked at the father and son and smiled before leaving the clearing as well. Naruto, Minato said with a strained voice as he looked down. I'm sorry for what I did. The blonde grit his teeth before punching the Yondaime in the arm, shocking him. He looked up at the man and grit his teeth. Why me? He asked. He knew he was going to ask that. He never really was prepared for this moment. He always hoped that when he met his son, he would have already understood why. Because, don't give me crap about me being the only child, he shouted at him angrily. Minato sighed before looking in his eyes. I didn't trust anyone else. Sealing Kyuubi inside an Uchiha would have been catastrophic, a Hyuga as well. Other people, I have no idea what would have happened. I didn't have faith in others. He told his son as he kneeled down and placed his hand on the blonde's shoulder. I only trusted you because you have mine and your mother's personality. I knew you would be the only one to do this task. He told him as the blonde looked up at him and embraced his father. Thank you, he said. Even though I still wonder how my life would have been without QB, I am somewhat happy all this happened. If it didn't, I would have never met them, he said as Minato smiled, knowing he was referring to Phineas and Seiya. I'm happy for you and how you grew up. You made me proud. And I am sure your mother is proud as well, he told him as the blonde looked up once more. Dad, could you tell me about Mother? He asked with hope in his voice as the Yondaime chuckled and nodded. Your mother was the most beautiful woman I had ever met. You won't believe how I met her, he said with a grin on his face as he started blushing, earning a small chuckle from the teen somewhat getting an idea.